We will call to order the Joint Planning Commission and City Council meeting for September 4th, 2024 at 6 p.m. Welcome everybody that's here and online, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would look for a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
This is Robin Alford.
Go ahead.
Nope, you go.
This is Janet, I second.
There's a motion made and a second. We'll call for the vote.
Scott, aye.
Janet, I.
Rob, aye.
Barb, aye.
Jesse, aye.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
Robin, aye.
And Lynn, aye. Now we will go to look for a motion for the approval of the August 21st, 2024 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
This is Robin. I'll make a motion that we accept those minutes.
Scott, I'll second.
Okay, motion's made and a second. I'll call for the vote.
You want to start with?
No, just Planning Commission.
Okay.
Scott, aye.
Barb, aye.
Robin, aye.
And Lynn, I'll abstain because I wasn't here. Next is the approval of the August 21st, 2024 MTW Truck Wash Public Hearing meeting minutes.
I noted on page 13 of our packet, page 6 of 7 of the truck wash public hearing minutes. Sorry I didn't catch this sooner. That there's 3 small errors on that page. The 4th paragraph that begins with "Say Barb," I have one more question too. That was attributed to Commissioner Wood. That should be changed to Wendell, and the 2 subsequent follow-up questions should also be changed.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I make a motion to approve the truck wash public hearing minutes with the aforementioned edits.
This is Robin. I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion made and a second. I'll call for the vote.
Scott, aye.
Barb, aye.
Robin, aye.
And Lynn, I'll abstain because I wasn't here. Okay, next is public open forum. Does anybody have anything to say?
Hello. Yes.
That would be you guys?
Okay, if you could bring up slide 1.
Anybody online? Hearing none, we will go to the presentation from the Anoka County Election Integrity Team.
There we go. Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Council members, committee members, and staff. I'm Brenda Miller, and I've been in Columbus resident since 2016. I am here as a member of the Anoka County Election Integrity Team, also known as ACEIT. I met with Council Member Haglund and Administrator Davis a few weeks ago, along with 2 other ACEIT members. And this evening, many more of us are here to present a summary of what was discussed and then to take some questions. Our nonpartisan group came together over deep concerns for the loss of local control of our elections. As you can see, our members have a variety of experience, many with IT backgrounds, administration, business owners, and many of us are election judges. Over the last 2 years, we've grown to over 20 members who consistently meet every week. We've done in-depth research to identify election reform strategies that you, as city leaders, can take to bring back control of our elections and make them more secure and give Columbus residents more confidence in the election process. The purpose of elections is to accurately measure the will of the people, but our elections have become so complex and outsourced that more than 60% of Americans no longer trust the election process. We focused on solutions that apply existing law, focuses on what we can do now, and emphasizes local control. Okay, these are the goals we are focusing on. Number 1, small voting precincts. 2, election secured election judge data. 3, verified registered voters, validated paper ballots, paper poll books, and hand-counted paper ballots. And we do have sample resolutions available for each of these. Okay, the first is the importance of maintaining small voting precincts, and this is done with local control and management. And as you know, Columbus currently has 1 precinct. We've included a graph illustrating Columbus's registered voters from 2010 to 2022. The red line delineates 2,000 registered voters. The Minnesota Secretary of State recommends that no more than 2,000 registered voters are per precinct because it's more easily managed. And as you can see, Columbus is growing, and it seems to be time to have it 2 precincts because the population has gotten quite a bit above the 2,000 line. Okay, the next one. So keeping in mind that the cities are authorized to determine precinct size, please consider a resolution to keep it under 2,000 and add a precinct for Columbus so it's more easily managed. Slide 8. Because many of us are election judges, we are concerned about the security of election judge information. And so our second action is to secure election judge personal data through local management and storage. There's always data security risk in outsourcing, and we have found that Anoka County outsources this information. It's currently using the Modus software through the contract with Intech Software Solutions Incorporated, and we have a big concern with this because this is a non-governmental agency, and organizations like this have no, they don't have to be react to any FOIA requests. So with outsourcing things, especially in elections, we have concerns because in this case, it manages data related to election operations, including election judge information. And therefore, like I said, if hacked, NGOs don't have to respond to Freedom of Information Act requests. So judges would really have no place to go to request information if there was a breach. And this happens frequently now with the NGOs that we're finding is happening more often in government. So the contract that we've looked at seems to have vague outlines of what the company's responsibilities are and who sees that information. And this poses a security threat not only to the election judge, but potentially other election items. So as we know, data transferred electronically is hackable, and the cloud is hackable. Encryptions don't eliminate risk, and as we've seen, it's hacked every day. Often third parties that transfer data know that it's hackable, so they do infuse language in their contracts that frequently clears them of responsibilities. Data shared cannot be controlled and therefore poses a security threat. So as you can see here, we would request to bring that back in-house and have it on a local PC without electronic connections to other entities. Okay. Since there are security risks with outsourcing and government does have an obligation to protect the information of its employees, and election judges are government employees, we would like you to consider a resolution to bring all that information back in-house. Okay, thank you. Okay, now I'll turn it over to Scott to do the next goal.
Hi, I'm Scott Coggins from Andover. I'm an election judge. I'm also have background in e-learning and technology. And what I want to talk to you about is goal number 3, which is verified registered voters and through local management. And through the Secretary of State, they manage the statewide voter registration system and provides the master list that ultimately goes to the county auditor. The county is technically there to clean up voter rolls and clean that list up. Our group wanted to make sure that that was getting done, so we actually looked at different software and questioned the county in terms of what they were doing. From what we were told from the county, there wasn't funding available. So we found a software we could use to actually look at this. And when we did that, we found basically, next slide. We found 2,218 potential duplicate active voter registrations in the county. And many of these were many years old. So we basically wanted to look at more detail, and we were able to connect with Tom Hunt within Anoka County and work with him collaboratively to look more into this. So essentially, that list, he then looked and verified those numbers, and ultimately was able to go through their process and look at the list that we provided, and we're able to send out cards, and there basically were 969 cards that are sent out to basically verify those duplicate records that we found. And so the idea here is that we're working collaboratively with the county. We found a problem, identified it, but technically we shouldn't have to be doing this. So really ultimately what we're want to inform you about is we basically want to make sure that the county is doing these things. And so there's higher end filters that they could be doing. And next slide. Essentially, there's a resolution that we'd like you to look at, which is basically requesting funding and execute these high-level filters so that the county is doing this and ultimately cleaning up these voter rolls. Next slide. The next goal is validated paper ballots through local management. Next slide. And essentially, we want to let you know that the cities can administer their own absentee ballots, including mail-in ballots. And so we just wanted to provide that information. Next slide. We wanted to show you that obviously the trend is now going more towards early voting. So mail-in voting is happening more often. And so the whole idea here is a lot of these things have been pushed upstream and harder for us to manage and see. And it turns into a black box that we can't either ask questions or get answers. And so what we're providing you is solutions and resolutions that you can do as a city to empower you and bring those things back locally. So next slide. So in summary, just wanted to talk about the fact that obviously there's greater risk with fraud with mail-in ballots. We'd recommend that you would adopt a resolution for mail-in ballots using counterfeit resistant ballots. And so we have a lot of information in terms of actual resolutions and can provide that later, but I wanted to bring that to your attention. I'll pass it to the next person.
Thank you, Scott. My name is Derek Lind, and I live in Ramsey. Third time out here. Election integrity goal number 5 is return to paper poll books. Next slide, please. You look at the state of Minnesota here on this chart, 28 counties right now do not use electronic poll books. 16 counties use them in some precincts, and then 45 counties use the e-poll books. Next slide, please. If you choose to go electronic, you're bringing these software vendors into that process. You can see that list right there. No Inc. is the main software vendor, Verizon, Cisco Meraki, you can read the list yourself. All of those software vendors would be involved in the process of using electronic poll books. If you choose to go with paper, on the right-hand side there, nobody's involved, just you. Next slide, please. According to state statute 201.225, you have a choice as to whether or not you use electronic poll books. It's right there. It says you may use them if you want to. Next slide, please. Paper works. Do you guys remember the days when we would go vote and you'd walk into your precinct and you'd tell them your name and they'd flip over the paper and they'd find your name and you'd say, that seemed to work just fine, didn't it? That's the way we did it until 2018. The last 3 elections we've been using these electronic poll books. Our team would say this is one of the most important things we need to get rid of. If you want to bring security back into our elections, nobody should know that I'm voting on election day until the election's over. When I walk into that precinct today and I hit that poll book, they know I'm there. Nobody should know that. That's part of election integrity. Nearby Isanti County, which is just to our north, they're still using paper in 17 out of 19 precincts. We have to have paper as a backup anyways, so it's already there. We were told at one time the paper was printed the night before. Now we're starting to hear something different, but it's no, I don't want to speak to that. It's pretty close to up to date. I apologize we don't have a better answer for you on that. Each precinct maintains their copy on site on election day. Next slide, please. Our recommendation is that you return to paper poll books. Paper poll books are the safe way to check voters in. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joe Richardson. I live in Andover. I am a past and current election judge. So ACEIT's sixth integrity election goal is hand-counted paper ballots. During the elections, everything we do as judges is verified at least twice, except for the actual vote. It's not verified at all. We rely on a tabulator, vote counting machine, whatever you want to call it, to accurately count the vote of each paper ballot, but we don't check it. The only way to verify the accuracy is to do a hand count of the ballots. Go to the next slide, please. So ACEIT started out pursuing a strategy of not using the tabulators at all and hand counting ballots on the election day. Unfortunately, the legislature in 2023 changed the law that said if you had used the tabulators for federal or state elections, you had to continue to use them, you couldn't eliminate them. So then we shifted over to performing a hand count after the polls were done to do a verification of the tabulators. But then in 2024, the legislature changed the law that said once the tabulators upload electronically the information and print the tape, they have to immediately take the ballots and put them in the boxes and get them sent over to the city or the county. So that eliminated that possibility of trying to do hand count the night of the election. So in response to all these changes, we've now shifted to looking at doing what we call an expanded post-election review, or PER. And for those not familiar with the PER is basically just doing a hand count of a particular precinct. So we can go to the next slide. So why hand count? Our current voting process it's basically a black box. You stick your ballot in, you don't know what happens. No one knows what happens. So there is no one that can truly stand before you and with 100% accuracy and confidence tell you that the tabulator correctly counted the vote. There's no way to do that. So when the tabulators were first introduced years back for the election process, they were accepted by everybody based on the ability to audit the tabulator's results through cast vote records and digital images. So that gave everybody confidence that you could do a check. So the digital images are basically a photocopy of each ballot, front and back side, that goes into the tabulator. These records were supposed to be available for review so that anyone could do an audit, of the tabulators used in the election process. However, in 2023, again, we passed another law that prevented the public from having access to these digital images and cast vote records. So there is no way for anybody in the public in Minnesota to look at them and do any form of an audit. And go to the next slide. So as you can see on the left-hand side, there are very few races that actually have a standard PER performed on them. Basically federal races and the governor. Everything on the right-hand side has never had a PER done. We don't do a PER for the presidential or the general primaries, and we don't do any PERs for any of the down ballots. So they are never audited, they've never been checked on anything. It's just assumed that they are correct. Can we go to the next slide? So in Anoka County, there's only, again, as I said, there's only a couple offices looked at, and they only typically do a PER of 4 of 128 precincts. In 2022, they did increase that to 6. So they did 6 of 128. So when you think about it, we have 128 tabulators out in the various precincts across Anoka County, and we only do a look of 4 of them for just a couple of the races. So if you look at that pie chart, which would look at, you know, all the tabulators, all the races, you can barely see that sliver of what is actually checked. That's less than 0.3% is reviewed. The good news is that you do have the ability, you know, there's no law preventing or anything, that we can increase the number of offices that are looked at, and we can increase the number of precincts that actually have a PER done to them. And go to the next. So hand counting is the state's gold standard for counting votes. When there's any need to do a recount because you have a tight race or some other audit reason, they hand count. They don't reuse the tabulators, they hand count. So in 2023, I don't know if you're familiar, but Anoka Hennepin School District, the race up in the Blaine area was very close, so they had to, under law, do a hand count. And the hand count actually found one more vote for the winner than what the tabulators were able to come up with, because the tabulators can't look at voters' intent. They just kicked a vote out that they shouldn't have. And then, as you can also note, during that race and some other studies, it takes less than 6 seconds to count a vote. So it's not a long period of time. These can be done in a relatively reasonable time frame. We go to our next. So hand counting is a feasible strategy that can be done. We would, what we call is an expanded PER that we could look at being done. We'd use the tabulators at day of vote, just like the state law does. But then we would ask an expanded PER be performed for the selected precincts that you want, and hand count only the competitive races. There's no reason to hand count when you only have a single person running for an office. So you just ignore those and just focus on the competitive races. The PER is performed between 9 and 14 days following the election day. It's not something that's immediate. There is a time of, you know, more than a week, but no more than 2 weeks. It's set by the ballot board. So you can, you know, do that hand counting at that point in time. Election judges, you know, they're not like, I just did my 16 hours and have to go again the next day. We can go to the next slide. So this is what your guys' precinct would look like if you were to do an expanded PER on it. You can see it's basically $1,000. It would be $1,000 based on the information we have. You will get a copy of this spreadsheet. You can make changes if we have the pay rate wrong. Maybe we have an office or two wrong, and you can make adjustments and figure it out for yourselves so you have the exact data you would need for that. So with that, I'll turn it over here to Lori.
Hello, my name is Lori Mahold, and I live in Coon Rapids. I'd like to take a moment to weave together what you've heard from us and make sure that you know you're the linchpin to saving our nation. Sounds like big lofty words, right? Rather melodramatic, but it's true. Local control is so important. It's critical. You see, the truth is you do an excellent job for your portion of the process, but when we hand parts of the process off, we lose control. We don't have those accuracy controls any longer. And control has shifted to higher levels of government without us, in some cases, even knowing about it. And what's worse is that we have a growing trend where we're handing stuff off to non-governmental organizations instead of keeping it as the process controlled within our own governments. And now we're being prevented, as Joe and Brenda have shared, we were being prevented from seeing the source data so that we can verify it. So I'm just going to run us through the most current example with the voting. At the precincts and in your city, your well-trained teams know exactly how to handle those ballots, right? They've got processes, they're tight on it. Everywhere we look, we're doing a great job at the city level. Right down to making sure that we heard that clink when the ballot was fed into the tabulator, fell in the box. It's like warming to our hearts as election judges, right? And so we know, we also saw the tabulator go up a count. So we have this sense of security. Even the nighttime, end of the night routine that we have where the ticker tape comes out of the tabulator and we transfer that information over to the summary sheet, we're good at that. We're very good. But after that, we kind of lose sight. The problem is that we're assuming that what the tabulator tells us for vote counts for each and every candidate is accurate. Well, we never had our eyes on that. And yet we're expected to sign off on that summary sheet and on the ticker tapes that we're saying those are accurate counts. We don't know that. We trust, but we don't verify. So we've heard lots of stories about the legislation has changed that we can't verify a lot of things anymore. And the problem is we've trusted without verifying for so long that we're starting to lose some of our options to do that verifying. It's starting to slip away. But there are still actions that you at the city level that have the authority and the control to make. As you've heard from us, these 6 goals that we've set out here are things that you can do. That's where we focus, not things that are out of your touch. We've shared this information with other cities in Anoka County, and they're seeing the problem too. In fact, some have begun to take action. When we first started presenting these, they're like, okay, that's 6 really great things, but what do we focus on first? And so we suggested the expanded PER that Joe was just talking about. So we've had Oak Grove, we've had Ramsey, and we've had Ham Lake all pass resolutions. Sorry, I'm not keeping up with this. Thank you. Pass resolutions to request that their precincts be on the list of those that get the PER. Now, when they're doing those resolutions, they're not only saying, hey, we want to be part of that PER canvassing board, we want our precincts included. They're also saying, and not just the top of the ballot, we want the down ballot as well. Every race matters. And so we suggest you guys take this information and decide, is this right for you? I mean, this is a great way for you to be able to tell the citizens in your city, hey, we know your vote counts because we actually counted your vote. And so there's a sample resolution in your packet for you to consider and customize for your city. Lots of resolutions in that packet, but including the PER. And we just want to remind you that we know that your decisions are powerful and that they not only affect right now, but the generations to come. Because we've seen generations start to lose this ability to verify, but you can still reclaim it. When you're in control, there can be assurance of accuracy. And we know that people care about this because we just had Alpha News, Liz Collins, come and do an article with us and put a video out there and telling about how we're kind of saying trust but verify. And in just a few short weeks, there was over 120,000 views as it traveled from Alpha News to Rumble to YouTube and other places. So people are hungry for this, and I think that when you take action, people are going to support you in this way. So this is kind of what we want to talk about. There's 6 different actions, and if you're picking one, we'd say the PER and get rid of the e-poll pads. But we would be happy to answer questions now, later, both. And so that kind of wraps it up for us. And before I give the microphone back to Derek and Brenda, I'm going to say thank you. We appreciate you guys making the time for us and giving us your attention. Thank you.
Thank you for the time. Are there any questions?
This is Robin. How long are we talking about this delaying results of the election? By going through the hand counting, are we going to announce results like typical the next day, and then we're going to hand count and tell you if it's different?
I think the PER takes place about 10 days after. Is that?
Yeah. But what result, are they going to wait to announce results of the PER?
No, so
Will they announce earlier?
on the night of the election, you would still upload from the tabulator the information. The tapes would still everything would get dropped off the next day or two with the county as you're required. So everything would happen just as it was. The PER is just an audit, a check, a validation. And they normally do a PER. We're just asking for an expanded PER, and then they certify following that.
Okay.
So it doesn't delay anything.
How soon does certification normally take place? Before?
It's basically the same process, because the ballot board will meet. They meet a few days after the election, and then they establish this PER. I think they've already picked the date and location, but then some final stuff. Then they do the PER, and that information goes back to the ballot board, and they do the certification.
Okay.
So it's all within the same time frame, or not? Or canvassing board. I'm sorry, ballot board, canvassing board. But there's no change in any time frames.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is Janet. First, I just want to thank you all. I know you spent a huge amount of time doing this. This is all volunteer, unpaid, just on their own account. And whether you believe that there might be a problem or not, I mean, these are concerned citizens that are trying to be proactive in their attempts to basically provide some confidence in the election process. And as you know, that 60% figure does not surprise me. So as we talked at our meeting, what made a lot of sense to me was that this isn't about contesting prior elections or even contesting the election. It's putting processes in place so that everybody can feel comfortable that there is integrity in the system, that things haven't been hacked, that there's checks and balances over and above what currently exists now. And that actually makes a lot of sense to me. My question is one for Jack. I know, Jack, you were going to reach out to Mr. Hunt. I don't know if you had a chance to do that. And the reason that's important is, and correct me if I'm wrong, from what I know of our process, a lot of it gets dictated by the county. So it might say in statute that municipalities have some ability to sort of, make decisions. That hasn't been what I've observed, but perhaps you can speak to that, Jack.
I haven't received anything back from Mr. Hunt as of yet.
And am I right that some of this, like if Columbus said, no, we want to go back to paper poll pads, we can't just do that. And even with the PER, my understanding is that we can make this resolution, Anoka County can veto it, correct?
That's correct. The canvassing board can say no.
Yep. So I think one of the important steps, and I think you guys have done a great job on this, is to continue to maintain that collegial relationship with the county, so that we're working towards this in lockstep rather than feeling like it's an adversarial thing. Mm-hmm. I like a lot of your language. You're not making accusations. You're not, making assumptions that things are broken now. I think what you're doing is you're pointing out vulnerabilities and suggesting solutions for addressing those vulnerabilities, and I can't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah, real quick on the poll pads, we're not aware of any reason yet why you can't get rid of those. The county may push back a little bit on that, but one of our members here, Bob, has been digging into that, and we don't think there's a joint powers agreement on that. So there's been some back and forth on that. I want to comment on one other thing too. We've given this presentation to 8 cities. We were in Anoka last night. Next week, we're in Coon Rapids, and then in October, we're in Lino Lakes. So 10 cities have brought us in for presentations out of 21. And there's several other cities that are still thinking about it. We don't know if we'll get into them in time, but that shows you the appetite for doing something within Anoka County. It's not just you guys. Any other questions?
I was just going to mention one more thing about the poll pads, is that you're required to have a paper backup anyway. So regardless, you already have it there.
So what is the additional cost to the city to implement this? I saw $999 somewhere.
Yeah, the estimate is $999.
Yeah, and I know, Jack, you did sort of a back of the napkin calculation when we were meeting with Brenda and can't think of the gal. Lisa, thank you. And you pretty much came, I think it was $1,200.
Yeah, I came
It
up
was
like
pretty darn
$1,000 to $1,200. So we were pretty well in the ballpark with that estimate.
Yeah. One of the mayors who's thinking about doing this says we have budgets that can be millions of dollars. We can spend $1,000 to verify our votes. So
we have one precinct here for 3,000 people?
yeah.
We can keep one precinct, correct? I mean,
Yeah, you can. It's recommended that you break it up, but that's not a statute, I don't believe it. So it's like a recommendation.
I think that I understand the recommendation. I think that the question is, with all the early voting that happens now, I'm not sure. I think that's a recommendation that deserves to be relooked at, because it's not like the old days where you had everybody showing up at the polling place on that day and lines were going out into the parking lot and things like that. We still get a lot of people who do it in person, but we get a ton of people that cast their votes. And a lot of our citizens send them here. They drop them off, or they wait until there's direct balloting, those 7 days before, or I don't know what it is now. It used to be 7 days. They want to feed that thing into the machine themselves. So I think the majority of the absentee balloting that happens, at least in Columbus, people try to maintain that level of control by either bringing it in here rather than mailing it into Anoka County, or waiting until they can come in and feed it into the machine themselves.
Right. That's a great point. If we do see a day where we go to just hand counting, that's where you're going to want the smaller precincts. It just makes it easier, but we don't have to be there today.
Yeah.
So, any other questions?
I do have a question.
Yes.
So you, and thank you, that's a lot of good information.
Thanks
I
for having
appreciate
us.
all your time, just that's dedicated to this. And I mean, I'm for voter integrity, and I hope everybody is. But I was trying to figure out, when you do a PER, or of any of them that have happened, what were the results? Have you found that once you audit the electronic, that the hand count revealed something different?
We've never been part of that process. Do you have something you want to say?
There was 22 elections, there was one that was changed. There was one error, I think.
There's one error. We're told that they're pretty accurate. The mayor of Oak Grove, Weston, he's going to do all 4 of his precincts, and he's going all the way down the ballot. You know what he says? He says, I hope it's 100% accurate. And we verified it by computer and by hand. We know we got the count right. There could be other things wrong with the election, but not the count.
But not the count.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's the point Joe was trying to make. We don't double check this. We check it one time, and it's so important we should be checking it twice. That's what Deb Musgrove said from the city of Ramsey, and she spearheaded them extending the PER. They're doing 6 precincts out of 9, and they're going all the way down.
So is it against the rules to do an actual hand count on our own?
On election night?
Yeah. Or
It's against the law now.
against the law? Okay.
Yeah, they sealed the ballots, so Joe was talking
We
about
won't be doing that.
Right, right.
Maybe someday. They just changed that law this year.
Okay.
I just think practically, you can ask anybody who works those elections by that 8 o'clock time. I mean, sometimes they aren't shutting down here until 10 o'clock at night. They've been there since, 7 o'clock in the morning or whatever. I wouldn't want to be hand counting anything after
No,
like that.
if we were hand counting, you need fresh judges.
Bring people in.
Yeah, just,
Bring in another
it gets tiring.
I have a question or
Sure.
statement or whatever. Thank you again for
Yeah.
coming in and letting us know about this and all that. But so what's the goal? Because if we do it one year, you should really do it every year.
Correct.
Because if there's infiltration or something in a computer system, so this is something that you're really kind of voting on for the whole future.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very broad question, but I think in the beginning, the goal is to do something. And that's why we came up with these 6 action items. So start with these 6. And by the way, our first city that we went to was Oak Grove, and they said, thank you for the presentation, the 6 recommendations, but that's a lot. Which one is the most important? And I said, get rid of the poll books. And Bob, back there in the corner, he said, extend the PER. And that's what they ended up passing. So the first thing they did was extend the PER. They're doing all 4 precincts, and now they're looking at the poll books. They want to take them kind of one thing at a time, because it's a lot to take in politically, you know, and working with staff and stuff too. It's hard to change 6 things overnight. So the goal is to I think you're also sending a message to the county that they need to do something. The county hasn't been doing anything. We spent 18 months in front of the county, didn't get anywhere. So then we dropped down to the city level, and our message is resonating here. Like I said, 10 cities invited us in. We don't know how many PERs we're going to end up with, but we think it's going to be north of 3. We're at 3 right now, and we think we could get several more. I don't like to make predictions.
So Janet made a question over there that the county can veto it, or?
Yes.
So when would they veto it? Or when would the process happen? When you request to count them afterwards? Would they say, the county said, nope? Is that when it would happen?
Let me respond to your first question first. So on all the resolutions that were passed, they're not just for this year, they're continuing resolutions.
Okay.
So it would basically say, like in Ramsey, they wanted 2/3 of all their precincts going forward to have the expanded PER, so if they grow, there'll be more of them included in there. So the canvassing board will meet post-election. They have a time frame they have to meet, and they will make the decision at that time whether to allow these expanded PERs to go forward or not. And that's after the election day. So I don't know, is it 3 to 5? Something like that? When's the canvass board meet after the election? 3 to 5 days? Something like that?
I think this year the PER is probably going to be November 18th or 19th. So that's the date that they're likely to make the decision.
So they'll decide before the 18th, but I think it's 3 to 5 days they meet and they make the decision. We believe November 18th is the day they've already set to do the PER. So.
Well, if you guys met with the county, you must have got a feeling that they wouldn't do something like that, would they?
Well, it's a different group.
3 of them are elected officials. 2 of them, I believe, are staff, correct?
Yeah, 2 staff.
Yeah, 2 staff and 3 elected officials. So, I mean, politics will be involved. We're active in the BPOUs, and we'll apply the political pressure as we can. But yeah, they could do whatever they want. If you get a bunch of cities that say we want a hand count and the county tells them no, then, well, we'll see what happens.
That's what elections are for.
Yeah.
That's right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jack, I have another question for you. It's a process question. So if we adopt a resolution, say for an expanded PER, then the results of that, and it passes, then you send it off to the county, correct?
Correct.
And then typically, what's the response time? I mean, there's other resolutions where we pass things and it goes to the state or the county or whatever. I mean, is there any sort of standard, like, they get back to you within some period of time, or do they just?
It all depends.
Okay.
I hate to give that answer, but that's the true fact.
This is what happens when you're on the bottom of the food chain.
I believe they wait for the canvass board. I think the canvass board makes that decision. So I think Tom Hunt would say, we'll see what the canvass board decides. He's not deciding it.
Okay.
And I haven't got any word back, but the canvass board is the one that certifies our election results, and that's you, the city council.
Right. I mean, I know that we get those results. We see how many overvotes and undervotes and the whole thing, and then we pass a resolution to accept the results.
Before you go?
Yeah.
So is this the spearhead of a new thing happening.
I think so.
I would bet that the last 100 elections in Columbus were within one vote or less incorrect. Elizabeth ran a tight ship.
I think their point is that they're not saying it's necessarily broken. It's proactively assuring accuracy going forward and also proactively preventing. You know, if you're a bad actor and you're deciding you're going to hack into something, and you know that routinely there's a post-election review of some random number of, I mean, they don't know which precincts or which races you're going to count. You might think twice about doing that. Cities, I mean, so it's not going to change, it's not going to fix the whole problem or the perception nationwide, I should say. But it's something that we can offer our citizens that we take it seriously, and here's what we've done to ensure that our elections are accurate.
That's very well said. This is the beginning of a movement. We've got 2 years into this. We think we're going to be here for years afterwards. We're working at the local level, the county level, and then ultimately up at the state level, because that's where a lot of the worst laws are at. But we have to start somewhere. The political power starts at the local level, and that's why we're reaching out to these cities.
That was my point.
Yeah.
See it expanding to
We think that
Minneapolis
Anoka County is the leader on this right now, but it's in other counties. In fact, when I leave this place, there's a group in Sherburne County, and there's a larger group than ours down in Dakota County. We've been meeting with them too. They actually got started a year ahead of us. So it's in pockets throughout the state, but we think we're the best organized. Just from 2 years, we meet every single week. I mean, we were all strangers. We came together out of nowhere from all different cities, and we spent a lot of time together.
And I've been voting for 55 years or so.
Mm-hmm. Most of the changes have come in the last 5 years, though, when you think about it. Mail-in ballots, electronic poll pads, these machines have only been around for 20 years. The machines we're using today, you know.
And that's what I'm thinking. The old ladies who are younger than I am now used to say, oh, here you are, here's your line, here's your address. You still got the same mom and dad? Yep. Okay, go vote. So now it becomes, you throw it into a computer and who knows what.
Yeah, and the state has been passing these awful laws lately, so we got to start somewhere. That's why we need your help, or asking for your help.
And you say it's catching on.
Well, we think our message is resonating. You know, like Lori mentioned, 120,000 views. It's 10 cities inviting us back. I think that tells you a lot. 10 out of 21, and there's a couple other cities that are thinking about it. So yeah, 60% of the public doesn't trust the elections. We got a problem. You know, it's a matter of getting organized, and it's a political movement. You know, and that's what this is. So, and we're starting to establish some pretty good leaders, elected leaders.
This is what you can do as a city before the state takes more of your power away, right?
That's the trend. Most of the power is shifting to the state and the federal level, and elections should be done by you guys. You guys should conduct the elections for Columbus. Because you know the city, you know the people, you know the addresses.
Well, and that's the most important thing is your vote.
Yeah. They keep talking about speed. We've got a complaint right now that we were slow in the primary, right? They were saying that the totals were an hour late. All of that was computerized. We haven't changed anything. You know, post-election review comes after, but so. And feel free to continue to contact us with more questions. You can email. I think you've got Brenda as a contact. I know, like Oak Grove, they were calling us all the time afterwards. You know, they're just working through some things. Many cities were. So feel free to reach out to us.
And we have a sample resolution.
Yes.
To adopt. So
yep.
That could be there next Wednesday.
That would send a powerful message to your voters and to Anoka County. And trust me, we're going back to Anoka County. We're going to say we got X amount of cities supporting that you guys do something. It depends on how many we can get to pass these resolutions. Whether or not the Cannabis Board approves it, that's not your problem. That's our problem. We'll deal with that.
So what's the downside? $1,000 extra pre-election.
Yeah.
And we already are paying. The county doesn't pay, so we're paying for everything.
Yeah, you got to get some judges. You pay for it. It's your judges. Send them down there.
That's assuming all the judges. That's assuming all the judges charge, and we do know there's a lot of judges that do it for free. So that number could actually go down.
That's a great point. I live in Ramsey, and I told the Ramsey election clerk, I said, I'll do it for free, and I got 10 friends. And they weren't interested in that, you know. But I think we could get there someday, because we're talking once every 2 years, you know.
But your vote is a pretty important thing.
Absolutely.
It's going to be the last thing we have left.
Yeah.
And for $1,000.
Right. Or 1,200. I think you got a different vote over there.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Roughly. All right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you all.
so much,
for-
you guys.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
And please, we welcome and I hope you do contact Tom Hunt with any questions, you know,
Yep.
on that. We're fully supportive of
Great.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now we will move on for the Planning Commission to have their discussion on the MTW truck wash CUP. That was a public hearing at the last meeting. Is there anybody here from MTW? Okay. Any discussion from the Planning Commission members that were here?
No,
I had one that when I was reading over the notes, do you have plans to put an in-ground sprinkler system in? Because it's kind of been a thing here, there's businesses that don't, and their trees are dying and they don't replace them, and then there's businesses like Truck-A-Line was all for it and put it in so that he doesn't have to worry about it.
So currently on our landscaping plan, we do not have irrigation planned, being that close obviously to the wetlands, so the ground is obviously saturated, but that is something we could add with backflow preventers and everything required to do that. So that is something we could add if that's a requirement part of the landscaping for the city. I know for trees and things like that, I think we hit on our landscaping plan, but that is something we could add.
I mean, it's just one of the things that I'd like to see. I know Truck-A-Line did it, but we have another business that didn't, and the trees die and you have to replace them, and yeah. I don't like to go to some place and tell them, hey, replace the trees. So, or send the compliance officer out for that. They should just automatically do it. But I think if there's a sprinkler system, you have less problems with that.
Sure. This is Barb. I don't think it's a question of whether or not the truck washing facility is allowed in in that zoning district. And I know that's what we're supposed to decide, but I really think it's more complicated than that. And my concerns are that I don't feel that we have adequate information about the water, and like we talked about. Jack said there would be, we're operating at 20% capacity, and that if this goes in, it would increase that to 40% capacity. That's just one business. And it just seems to me that that's excessive. And our real obligation is the safety and welfare of the residents of the city. And then the addition of 40 to 50 trucks per day to make this business viable does bother me, because we already have heavy truck traffic, which is, and this is just my concern, it isn't the rest of the Planning Commission, diesels, trucks are polluters, and we already have an asphalt plant. We have other businesses in that district already that have a lot of traffic. And then in addition to that, we have no plan for service to that road. I know it right now meets capacity, but who's going to pay for that down the road with all of these extra trucks? So in my opinion, these questions have not been answered for me. It's just not that simple to say, yeah, it fits. So that's all I have to say.
I'm with you on the traffic on the road. I don't know if that has been thoroughly thought through, but it is pretty busy right now. And with coming out of Love's and going, I'd like to see kind of a plan in place on how to take care of all the traffic.
Well, I think it should have been brought to the Planning Commission, all of these details. You know, I mean, otherwise you're just voting blind. You don't know what the impact of a business is in the long run. It should, for example, I remember at different meetings, Jim said there's a great deal of maintenance to the 4 wells that we have because we have sandy soil. Those are continuously, the soil is continuously collapsing into the well, so there's maintenance there. So what is this extra draw on our water going to do? Is that going to increase their work? So all of these questions are not answered for me, and maybe it isn't my responsibility to be concerned about it, but I still live here, and it is a major concern for me, the pollution and the extra expense to the city, the taxpayers.
Well, and my concern with the traffic is not just cars. I know a lot of I have family, and I know a lot of truck drivers, and they're like, oh, great, a truck wash. So they're all getting excited to go to the truck wash, and it's traffic that is new traffic coming in and not just what's at Love's or whatever. So, you know, my brother's like, oh, I was up in your area yesterday, and I was like, oh, okay, it comes up once in a while, but he's like, if there's a truck wash, I'm coming up more often. And so I think there's a potential for a lot of new traffic to come in on the road.
Madam Chair, may I speak? Thank you.
You may.
But Jack, what is the rating? Isn't that a 10-ton road or a 20-ton road or whatever?
It's a 10-ton road. That's the highest standard that we have, and it's to accommodate heavy truck traffic. And, you know, if you think about it, 50 extra trucks a day it's an increase, but it's not a huge increase. It's not like you're going to have 2 or 3, 4 or 500. So I think the truck load on there at that 50 unit per day is very reasonable, and the road should support that.
I respect that, but I also know that a few years ago, a business went in that, oh, it wasn't going to really, the traffic wasn't going to matter. And there's a lot more traffic on Lake Drive coming between the 235s. I mean, I used to come out of my street and be able to get on Lake Drive, not a problem. Now sometimes I sit there for 10 minutes because there's so much truck traffic on top of the car traffic. So I just want to put that out there that we maybe look at it, you know, after a year and see what's going on, because I don't, you know, there's been, how long has that business been there? And it's been miserable, and I don't even live by it. I just have to go out onto Lake Drive, and there's a ton of extra traffic.
But I think that's the magic of Hornsby Street. It's a commercial street. And of course, there'll be more traffic. I'll be in there washing everything I have to. But
I just think maybe the traffic at the stoplight getting back out, we may need to, because you got cars coming out of Love's too.
Yep.
And you can get backed up at that turn light.
Mm-hmm. I would suspect, though, that you're going to have more traffic at the intersection for Love's. If you just average it out, say over a 12-hour day, I don't know what their total operating hours will be, but that's just 4 trucks an hour. That's not very heavy. Now, it could get higher, of course, but based on what their projections are for now, that would be like a truck coming in and out of there every 15 minutes. Of course, we know it'll probably be peak times, but just as an average, that's what it would work out to.
May I ask, how long does it take to wash a semi?
15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah. And the same with an RV, roughly?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, so the automatic bay and the manual bay are pretty close to the same time frames.
Yeah.
So 15, 20 minutes per wash. Correct.
So as far as additional truck traffic, we kind of touched on this at the last meeting. Your target is the over-the-road trucker, is it not? Not necessarily the local fleets?
Either way.
I'm sure you'll take any of them. But.
Of course. The idea, and obviously the location next to the current Loves that was built, is essentially the people that are there for their overnights.
Correct.
In that lot, hey, come over.
So the idea that we're adding additional traffic to what's already at Loves?
Ideally, if there's additional traffic if somebody's coming up, obviously the Interstate 35, they're not stopping at Loves, but they do know that there's a truck wash there. That would be, yes, that would be additional traffic.
And that's not a highly traveled truck lane. I mean, it ends at Superior, Wisconsin. So correct. It's not like 94. And then local fleets, do local fleets tend to wash trucks at their own site with portable truck washes? And I mean, are you thinking about that?
So I don't know the answer to that. Obviously, James is not here, but my assumption is that most local, if they're in their local area, they're probably going to wash at their own hub.
Right.
They probably won't facilitate going to a truck wash to take care of it.
And I don't want to discount anybody's concern about additional truck traffic. I think that's valid, but I'm concerned that we're overreacting to the amount of additional truck traffic. Certainly, we talked about at the last meeting the truck traffic crossing from Loves and making a left-hand turn, and the time it takes for a long semi to make that intersection there was a point of concern. But I think the truck traffic itself, the additional truck traffic itself, we may be overreacting a little bit. I also agree with you, Barb, too. But also, semi-trucks are now low sulfur fuel, so that pollutants is becoming less, and there's the big push moving into even
electric.
And you could probably talk about that more intelligently than I can. I don't think we're going to have a big pollution problem due to additional diesel semi-trucks.
No, and I'm just saying maybe it's something that in a year you look at, because my brother has his own trucking company and he drives for the plant, and he doesn't have a hub to wash his truck. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the guys that drive for them are independents and don't have a hub. They take their trucks home, and so the fact that they don't have to go home and try to wash their truck is very appealing to them. So there is that, the independents, and then there are the ones that have a hub to go to. So I just think that we can, I'm all for it because there's not one around. And I think it's going to be a great business for our community. I just want to, kind of put it out there that in a year we kind of reevaluate the traffic flow, because I mean, I don't go to Loves, I'll tell you that, because I don't like trying to get out and then having to sit at the light to turn.
Well, and I agree with you, because I have a very conscientious 17-year-old son that every time his little 12-foot boat seems to be running low on oil, I have to take it up to the boat dealer up there. So I've been up there a lot. Thank God I have a conscientious 17-year-old. And it's not uncommon to have to wait for a truck to pull out of Loves. And I guess my point is we're already dealing with that now. To say that this is going to have a huge impact on that truck traffic up there, it will definitely have an impact on it, but I don't think it's going to have as big of an impact as we're worried about. And the other thing too is, remember, truck drivers are bound by when and how long they can operate their truck. So it's not like you and I jumping in our car and running up to, the car wash on Broadway in Forest Lake.
And
they're limited on when they can do it.
As was noted at the last session, that truck drivers don't wait around to get their truck washed. And If four trucks
Yeah.
per hour go through, that's a minimal increase in traffic, a very minimal amount.
Semi-trucks aren't going to wait, but the people that are hauling for like asphalt, they'll sit and wait because they don't want to do it at home, and they're not bound to, they have their time. They're not making a log and stuff like that like the semi-trucks are. I'm just saying we are going to have increased traffic, and that's what we're here to discuss, and I'm okay with doing this. I just want to say in a year, maybe it gets reevaluated to see if there's something that we need to do with widening the road or something with the turn lane.
Excuse me.
To help accommodate the resident. It's going to accommodate trucks, but we have a lot of residents that go to Love's and sit there and try to get out. And I just want to see it flow a little better. So.
Can you make a suggestion that in a year, somebody checks up on it?
Yeah, we could have our compliance officer check up on it in a year.
May I? I have a couple of things I just want to bring up. So I think, Robin, you might have brought up the question about the stacking, how many will be in line. And we brought that up at the council meeting, and Dean, no, actually, I think it was Kevin. They went back and looked, and it was actually in their application. So I think they have enough space on site for like 10.
Correct.
So I think that was, to me, seemed like a really valid concern, but it seems like the design is adequate to deal with that. So I didn't know, it wasn't super easy to find, so I just wanted to bring that up because it was something we discussed at the council meeting. To Barb's concern about the water, the staff needs to have an analysis of that. And I agree with her that you can't really approve this until you know that. I mean, we have spent time talking about, do we need a water tower in the future? And we've got Jim talking about the synchronization of the pumps and all that kind of stuff. So I think there just needs to be some information provided about how this fits into that whole process, and I think everybody would feel a lot more comfortable if we had that information from the staff. So I'm tasking you guys to do that. I don't think that's the applicants. They provide the numbers. You guys get somebody to crunch them and tell us how that's going to fit in. I mean, when I hear Jim say that when Running Aces fills up their water tank, it creates problems, that makes me think, well, this is going to be a lot more than that. So we need some information there. And then one other thought is that when Love's went in there was a traffic study done. Dig that out, because I think that can address some of the concerns that people have had about the number of the number of trucks and the backing up and all that kind of stuff. I think that might be helpful information. And then the last thing, again, to Barb's point about the number of big heavy trucks on that road. When we were going through the process of, before I was on council and the former council was looking at the asphalt plant, there was an analysis that can be done calculating easels. We learned about easels during that whole thing. So basically it's taking, there's a calculation that you can do based on the number of axles that a truck has, and it basically equates that to the number of cars that can, if you have a truck with like a semi-truck, that's equal to X number of cars. And you can calculate what the wear and tear on the road is, and we actually did that for the asphalt plant, and we could do that for this too, so that, again, it's information that I think might set some minds at ease. So if you don't have that, I can certainly give you what was used during that time, because that was part of our argument about before that road was actually made to 10-ton standard, what that was going to do to it. Thanks.
So this is Rob. I have a few things. So kind of playing off of what Janet was talking about with our well houses right now, and maybe the Planning Commission don't know that, but we've had to rebuild a well pump house. We've had pump issues in the last few years. we're looking at possibly having to put a water tower in. I think this is going to amplify that excessively with the excessive water use. Like Janet's talking about, they fill up a pump truck just to water the track, and it's causing issues to our system. So we're looking at no disrespect or anything, but if we bring in this extra water source, right, that they're drawing all this water, that might push the city and the taxpayers, forcing them to have to pay for a water tower that they wouldn't have had to pay for previous to this thing happening, right? So it's things we got to think about. A water tower is a couple $1 million plus. I think we're still looking into studies on that. So as far as the traffic goes, I do think it's an issue. If we thought, some on the council thought it was an issue on Lake Drive, why isn't it an issue up by the freeway, right? We're worried about truck traffic on Lake Drive and the congestion down there. 50 more trucks on top of Love's over inflated trucks. There's trucks parking on roads. There's trucks parking in the middle of the road waiting for a spot. What plays in there, right? Those are the big issues I'm seeing. I think it looks like a beautiful building, and I hope we can make it work. Just the traffic issues is what I'm seeing. There's not a lot of, I don't know that there's a lot of great use for that sliver. It seems like you drew it up properly to get people in and out. It's just, how do you control that congestion right in front of Love's, right? Because those trucks are going to be coming out as others are coming in, but maybe you're fortunate enough they're leaving Love's to go there before they get back on the freeway. So just a couple concerns I had. And what else? I think that is it for now.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So who finds this information? Dean, is it you or is it Eleanor? To assuage the fears.
I think a lot of the requests for this information should come from the applicant.
Okay.
Because they're the ones that are going to be supplying that for us. If the city does it, then we should set up some kind of an escrow to draw from, because we'll have to engage the services of the city engineer on some of this.
And may I ask applicants, do you recycle the water or is it all fresh? Or how does that work?
So we have the option of doing both. In the previous meeting, we discussed, pending what Met Council decides, of doing a research system to reduce our use of water, to eliminate SAC credits. That was one option that we were going to consider for cost.
And how much water does anybody know roughly does it take to wash a truck? 5 gallons or 5,000 gallons or what?
So it was 60 at maximum for a couple minutes on their high pressure system. So we designed the system for a 3-inch water main for 200 gallons per minute, feeding to the plant for for acceptable loss on the site. So that won't have any stagnant water. So it won't just be sitting in the pipe. That could be used, obviously, through the process. So if it sounds like if there's too much water being drawn into the facility, going to a research system, and again, we can provide those calculations because we'll have to do it anyways for Met Council. We can provide that, and that would eliminate some of your water usage that we're going to be drawing in.
And this is Barb again.
Yeah.
My point is that all of this information should have been presented before it was even brought to the Planning Commission. What does this do to the water pressure in the area? And to me, all of these statistics should have been presented before it came before the Planning Commission. That's just my opinion.
So we would need information regarding what the current force main is providing for PSI, and then obviously allowing us to draw off of that, which again, if your pumps are at 20% capacity, what would that have to bump your pumps up in your VFDs to get your pumps to increase, to offset that?
We're not experts. That's why we need expert.
Right, and we would need to know that from your city engineer, of what allowable water you can provide us.
And at what rate of flow is kind of what you're trying to find out.
But the city engineer should be able to get that, correct?
Yep.
Or your engineer should supply it to us?
Yeah, that's something we'd have to get some of that base information to them, but then with that, then they'd have to do the analyzation on it.
And I agree, there was a bit of hysteria, Rob, in the spring about water this and water that. So everybody has shut their sprinklers off because it rains every 3 days in Columbus this year. So the water usage has dropped to 10% of what it was last year when it didn't rain. So, you know, how panicked we want to be.
I think, Mayor, if I could, I think we're fortunate this year, but last year, you know, the city of Blaine had to pay out because they dried up everyone's, a good portion of private wells, right? We start doing that kind of stuff.
But we're so far away from Blaine.
In the public hearing minutes, it says 24,000 gallons a day.
That was based off of 24 hours a day operation.
Right.
That's what that council is going to credit, use our SAC credits for, 24-hour use. That's not actual use of the site. That's what they're going to say we can use.
Okay, so how much of that, say it's 24,000 gallons because you're open 24 hours a day, how much every day is recycled, or is that new water you're going to be taking every day?
So if you go to a recirculation system, you're actually recirculating 80% of your water.
80%?
So all that essentially gets screened out. So all the grit and everything goes into a tank.
Okay.
Remaining water, basically non-potable at that point, goes in a recirc system that runs back through and then can be reused through the car wash or truck wash.
Okay.
And then you're hydrovacing the contents that are left behind that recycled water?
That's correct. So those tanks will get cleaned out on a daily, weekly, whatever basis. There's a float in there that obviously lets you know the levels and all that, and that gets brought out to a facility that obviously gets disposed per EPA requirement. Correct.
And is that financially comparable for you guys? So you put in straight through system, or you put in the recycle?
So obviously, the biggest thing is what the city has available for water dictates the design of what you build your car wash for or truck wash. So if you have the ability to give us a 3-inch line with 200 gallons a minute, we can use that, and obviously everything else will get discharged back into your sanitary system after going through the trap. If there's not that much water available, or we need to make an adjustment based on your well situation, then we would make that adjustment, go to a recirc system to limit as much water as we're taking from the city, but that water would still get reused for the most part, and then obviously more water will still get discharged back into the sanitary line.
Well, that sounds good to me. You're wasting less water and getting the job done.
So again,
Dean, do you have anything to add?
Yeah.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Yeah. Dean, do you want to weigh in on anything?
What have you seen around the world here?
Greetings. First of all, I've heard comments about tax implications. You're operating enterprise districts for your sewer and water system, and so all of the expenditures, all of the income are all dedicated to the users. It's not an obligation of the city as a whole. So I think you need to understand that. The specific questions about water usage do need to come from the city. Public Works, the engineer. I can't comment on those. That's not a planning issue. Since your sewer and water district was established 20-some years ago, there have been discussions about the need for a water tower. Sometimes a large water user like this ends up being a winner for the community because the amount of usage is really going to help that enterprise fund and pay for a better storage system. Once you have more storage in place, you're not going to have the types of delays in water usage that you have now with such a small storage system. The timing for you to get this information, again, is something that really needs to be dictated by the city engineer and your public works director. We only need to be conscious here of your 60-day deadline, which I see by the staff report is the end of September. it would allow you to attempt to get a response for the planning commission at its next meeting and a recommendation to the council, and it would be before the 60-day, but you also can extend your 60-day deadline appropriately. So I don't know if that answered all your questions, but maybe that helps.
Okay, Sue, you had a question.
Yep, unless you had a response, Eleanor. I'll go first. Okay. So this is Sue. Most of my concerns were about water, which have already been addressed. But one step further, is there a stormwater management plan?
Yes, it's included in the application.
Okay, I didn't see it anywhere.
Yeah, there's 2 bioretention ponds.
But an actual stormwater management plan,
Yeah, it's
which is a document?
One second here.
I do have an answer for that. I don't know if it was included in the packet, the entirety of the stormwater management plan. I can send that out to everybody.
Okay.
That was submitted to Rice Creek Watershed, and they are having their final decision, their Cap Rock meeting on all of those submittals next week on September 11th to have that approved, but I can send you that.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't have it in my packet.
But
And I think those were, I mean, all the questions that came through tonight are good questions and need to be addressed. But just for my own opinion, that area is, I mean, you meet the qualifications. We put it as a use that we could have a truck wash. So, I mean, if you're meeting all the requirements, then, you know, we shouldn't have any issues.
I'd just like to say one more thing about the water. Our issue is not the capacity or the production of the water, it's the storage that we have. If we had an ample storage facility now, you can pump water in that storage facility at off-peak hours during the night when there's little or no use. It would have less disruptions on the system as far as having some things that we currently experience at this time. So, you know, one of these days, and it may be next year and it may be 5 or 10 years, we are going to have a water tank here.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I do remember when we went through that process that it was not a capacity issue. It's a pump issue.
It's a storage issue.
Yep.
So that's more a city council issue than his.
Yes.
But I think in order, I mean, this business, and I'm for it too, so don't misunderstand. We just need to figure out how this works because it will put a strain on the current system, and I need your staff to tell us how much of a strain that is, and then we can make an informed decision. And I think that, you know, if it pushes a date forward for having a storage solution, then we need to know that. So again, it's not necessarily a showstopper, but information is required. And I agree with Barb. I mean, that there should have been something kind of addressing that because that's a big deal. You can't just like not look and go, okay, we're going to approve it and we'll figure it out later.
Well, we do have new businesses going in where the exercise guy never used the water, but now our paws will be. And the veterinary clinic is across the highway, so that'll be, so there are new businesses coming in where I would have liked to seen the usage and how much and all that from Public Works, maybe.
Yeah, I got to say something here, only because it's not your project. I mean, your problem. It was our problem.
Yeah.
We knew this before you came in, and it has to be addressed.
Yeah,
So
that's why I said
just want you to understand. I thank you for applying, and I hope we can get this going. But it's our issue with the water. We got to deliver it to you. And somehow, I know we all are afraid of a water tower and the costs and stuff like that, but it's not going away. You know, it's going to eventually bite us in the butt if we don't get on it. So,
I mean, even the traffic issue is not your issue. It's the city's issue to keep on top of and take care of. So
Well, and I think that's where having the traffic study that was done will reassure you, because I think it was pretty well documented that even with Loves and the additional, that interchange was designed to handle way more than what's going through it right now and still be able to maintain flow, so.
Yeah, and I don't think we can, I mean, I probably could. I'm not going to put in there that you have to put a sprinkler system in. I'm just going to make a nice suggestion that it would be nice to keep everything green and growing.
So I want to add more water to the whole.
Yeah, that's more water.
Yeah, I do, because then it'll kind of keep things going. But. Any other discussion from the Planning Commission members?
I have one question. This is related to the footprint of the building, and I'm just curious as why it's a parallelogram shape instead of a square rectangle.
So, long, short answer is it's something a little more out of the box from a design standpoint. To keep it more of a trapezoid or parallelogram gives it more character, especially with an over-top canopy. And then obviously we made the adjustment so that you're obviously driving into the base straight. But if you're looking at the building from a certain angle, it looks like it's a trapezoid or parallelogram. So it's more of a architectural feature per se than actual a use. So, and anybody can build a precast building. You see them all over I-94 corridor, and even up, as you're going towards Ramsey and things like that. Anybody can pop up a precast building. But when we were working with the clients here on the design, we want to do something a little bit more, that will really be a showstopper. That will literally look like not just a standard block building and give it some architectural features. Mm-hmm. And it didn't really add that much to the cost to do it.
Thank you.
The building does look nice. Really does. So as far as the planning committee, Eleanor.
I was probably going to say the same thing as you, but I'm just going to bring it up. There seems to be quite a few other things that we want to address, so you can make a motion to either recommend this to City Council next week, or we can come back on the 18th at the next Planning Commission meeting with hopefully some more of these questions answered and have another discussion that would fit within the 60-day frame. We wouldn't need to extend it.
So let's go down. Scott, do you want to wait 2 weeks and
Do you need a motion for that?
No, I'm just taking a feel of.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think we need to wait.
Okay.
This is Barb, I feel we need to wait.
I'm indifferent about it. I mean, I understand the concerns, but I also am concerned that they feel more a part of what we're questioning than they probably should have to feel nervousness about. That's just how I feel, how I would feel. I would feel a little nervous with some of these questions coming up for the Planning Commission now, after we've already had one meeting with them, and suddenly we're coming up with a whole bunch of new questions that they don't have to have the answers.
Well, and that's
my
and this is the policy. The public hearing happens, and then this is where we do our discussion, unfortunately. And but it's also a thing of we need more information when we get our packet, and so it's not by any means anything to do with you guys. It fits. It's just, as a planning commission, we need to have information to be able to give recommendations to the council of what to look for as far as the traffic study or the water issue. So what we do is we either recommend to approve or disapprove, and then it's up to them. I'd feel better recommending to approve after I see all the information that we've had.
I agree with you, and I think the water issue is some pretty far-reaching implications for the people of Columbus, for that matter, for all of us, so yes.
So
I need some time.
Is there a motion to bring the discussion back up at our September 18th meeting.
I'll make the motion to bring it back up on the September 18th meeting.
Is there a second?
This is Barb, I'll second that.
Okay, motion's been made and second. I'll call for the vote.
Scott, aye.
Barb, aye.
Robin, aye.
Lynn, aye. So we will, in 2 weeks, we have our next Planning Commission meeting on the 18th, 6 o'clock here. We'll look for more information, maybe just the traffic study that was done when Loves went in, a public works study, so that we can make the recommendation to the council.
If you can get me some information on your water needs, peak demands, what your max flows are, and what your anticipated daily usage are, then we can get some things to run some analysis to address some of these questions.
Okay, I'm gonna write this down here.
Because we'll come back on the 18th, and then the council meets on the 25th. So then it'll go to the council on the 25th. So you'll have an answer by the end of the month. Okay. Next, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we get to Dean. You're up. Our presentation and discussion of our cannabis ordinance.
Well, good evening. You've got a little one-page summary from our first discussion a month ago. And what I would really like to do is just walk down that list and let everyone respond and make sure that you have either got consensus or you perhaps change some consensus that you may have had. I do want to mention, since the time we met last, there was a program. I don't know if any of you attended a Zoom meeting that the Office of Cannabis Management had right after our last joint meeting. But one of the interesting things that came out of there, and you wouldn't know it unless it came from the office, is that there are current caps. That means limits on the number of licenses that they are going to consider for 4 of the main businesses that are there. And I'll just give those to you because it might help answer some questions you have in terms of how many of these are going to be potentially located here in the metro, statewide, so on and so forth. And it's pretty revealing. And the lowest number, the cap for a manufacturer in the state of Minnesota, and this initial go around, is 24 businesses.
And Dean, before you...
And I want to keep that,
Dean,
24 manufacturers are going to be selected out of a lottery, whether they get 24 or 2,400 requests for manufacturing cannabis facilities. And
Dean, is that in the state of Minnesota or in each, wouldn't be in each city, it's the whole state?
That's the entire state right now. The cap on the number of manufacturers is 24. We've got 83 counties. If you said maybe there's one that ought to go in every county, there's not enough to go around. It's about 1 per 4 counties. Now, all of this is subject to change. These numbers are not listed in any of the statutes from the 23 legislative session or this year's legislative session. These are things that will ultimately, I suspect, be spelled out in the rules, which I touched on at the last meeting. There was a draft of the rules which provided no direction whatsoever for local units of government. In other words, for us that may have questions about procedures, there was really no direction or help. It focused on the different business types and information that they may be obligated to provide and so forth. So right now, they have placed a cap on the number of manufacturers that they will consider licensing coming out of the chute in early sometime the year 2025 at 24. They've put a cap on cultivators at 50. And again, this is statewide. They have put a cap on mezzo businesses at 100. And they've put a cap on retailers at 150. And I think any of us might have assumed that, gee, there might be one or two applications per city, or at least cities that have a regional draw or pull for retail type business activity. And that could be, larger regions like Rochester, Duluth, or even St. Cloud, or it might be more rural areas like Winthrop that might serve a very large geographic area, but a small population area. If you've got 150 retailers spread out through the state, there's going to be a lot of competition. And again, these are entered in a lottery. And I don't know the process other than all of the business applicants have to submit license information to the state. If they meet certain state requirements, then they submit locations for specific businesses. And then they are ultimately entered into this, in this instance, with a low number of businesses that have caps placed on them. They're going to go into a lottery system. And it would be after that lottery that communities like Columbus would end up receiving a request perhaps for one of these businesses that made it through the lottery system. And we have to be ready to say it complies with our particular ordinance requirements. The licenses that don't have any include a micro business, which I know we talked about, wholesale business, transporters, testing business, the medical facilities, delivery business. And so there are a number more that aren't subject to current caps, but they will all be based upon going through an initial vetting system yet to be clearly understood by the state before they would notify any local unit of government that there is a business that would like to locate in our community. So I wanted to start with that because that information was not available previously. There were only a couple of other clarifications or even questions, I should say, for clarifications that came out of that particular presentation. And there remain a number of questions, and I'll talk about a couple of these that I don't find answers to. Ultimately, I'm going to prepare a laundry list of what are really some more legal questions. We'll pass those on to the city attorney and let them comment. I don't know the time frame or the basis for which they make certain decisions, but I'll give you an example. And we talked about this at our first meeting. The statutes are very clear. It says once there is an acceptable application for one of these businesses to the state, they then refer those to the local unit for the local unit to certify that that registration or the state license meets our requirements. And we have to do that in 30 days. Well, my original concern and comment, and this did come up at the meeting, how can we be doing this if in fact we're issuing a conditional use permit, which the majority of cities would be doing for most of these facilities. And we have by statute an allowable 60 or 120-day review period. I went through since our meeting and after this workshop that was held, and I reread the statutes, and it doesn't say anything about a local process other than certifying to the state within 30 days that they meet our requirements. And so this is one of the bigger primary questions that I will have on a list within the next couple of weeks to give our attorneys, and try and find out from them what process we're going to get these answers, or whether they have information already that I'm not finding. It's extremely difficult to make contact with anybody at the Office of Cannabis Management. You basically submit an email request and somebody may get back with an answer to you. They don't publish a phone number anywhere that I have found anywhere that allows you to make personal contact with any of the staff. And so it's a little frustrating. And we knew this going in, and I think I cautioned at the last meeting that there are a lot of moving targets, and we're going to have to be prepared to make a lot of final decisions, perhaps at the end of the process. One of the other bigger questions I've had, and I don't, again, find this in my third or fourth review of the actual statutes. I don't see any clarification in these draft rules, which indicate whether we as a city can require that the location of an event license, if you remember us talking these at the last meeting, these are maximum 4-day events that if someone gets a license as an event organizer, can submit to a local community and request that a permit be issued for an event. And my question is, can these be, or should they be, restricted to other licensed facilities? So if we have a licensed retailer, if we had a mezzo business or a micro business, a manufacturer or a wholesaler, those that are involved with the primary activity associated with ultimate retail, can we restrict these businesses to be located at one of those licensed facilities? Well, if we have none licensed in our community and the state says we must allow an event, my question then becomes, if it's not to be held at an existing licensed facility in the community, what requirements can we hold? Is this a circus tent? Is it like what you used to have on or can this simply be required to be located within an existing facility that meets all existing security requirements, lighting, advertising, and so forth? There's no answer. And this will be on another of my lists to give the attorneys for problems that I've encountered. And I'm assuming that they're having some contact with either clients that are looking to establish businesses or perhaps other communities like Columbus and are encountering similar questions. But I want to try and complete a list as best I can and then forward that to the city attorney. So with that kind of an introduction, I'd like to go down the list in that brief memo that I had and just walk through some of the consensus that appeared to be reached at the last meeting and put it out for your debate and discussion. And if there is consensus, we'll move on. If there isn't, we'll talk about it. The first one that I noted was that you didn't want outdoor cultivation, certainly not in the rural residential district. You'd prefer not to have outdoor cultivation anywhere. But if we were obligated to do that, restrict it to those light industry or general business districts. In part, that's because these do have to be secured with fencing, with lighting, other things which are not compatible, certainly with your rural residential district, but would be more consistent with one or more of the industrial districts. So with that, is there any debate, discussion, or are we on the same page with that particular item?
We're good.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yep. No change.
No change. We're good on that one.
I'm not hearing anything. Good. We talked about the number of retail licenses at the last meeting, and part of that discussion was my description that if we as a community under 12,500 population wanted to use that as our ceiling, by law, we only have to allow one retail facility. We can't pick what that is, whether it's a retail store or whether it is a mezzo business that has a retail license, or a micro business that may have a retail license, or a manufacturer or a wholesaler that may have a retail business. But if you decided that there is any particular business currently located in the community that may be interested in this, the way that you are allowed by law to select them if there's competition is to go on a first come, first served basis, or you would go on a lottery basis. I haven't seen an expansion of options beyond those. And so if you had a local business that you knew was very interested in this, but they're going to be in heavy competition, and they first have to get certified, most likely through a process at the state before it would even come to the city. Do you want to open that up to more than one that the state requires? And you have the option. You could have unlimited number of retail, or you can restrict it to one. So at the last meeting, there seemed to be consensus. I won't say it was unanimous. There was at least one dissent in that discussion. And my notes indicated that you ended up with general consensus on 3 licenses. So let's talk about that.
Dean, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, so this is Janet. The cap information is really helpful. I think, I'm still with, let's just stick with one. I get what you're saying. There's going to be a lot of competition. The likelihood that we would even get one is pretty small. I just feel like the less amount of time we can spend on this until things get sorted out, that makes the most sense to me. It's not, I don't think it's going to be a big revenue generator for us. I don't think it fits into what our vision for Columbus should be. I get that we have to accommodate what the state says we have to accommodate, but I think one meets that, and if, we were trying to get a meeting set up with, one of the businesses that we thought might be interested, and that didn't happen. But this probably isn't going to go away. So if they don't make it on the first round, I'm sure they'll increase the number or whatever. I'm not worried about that. So I still stick with one.
And this is Sue. I still stick. But it did bring up a question. So if we did say one, say everybody voted, oh, let's just have one, we can change that to more at any time or in the next year? Do you know? Or if we say 3, we stick with 3?
That falls in the category of unclear. I'm assuming virtually at any time you could change that. But I can't answer that.
Okay, then I would say let's stick with 3. Considering that was a consensus before, if it still is now.
This is Rob. I'd say 3 or more, like you were saying, Sue.
Can someone just explain, because I'm not getting it, why 3?
It's to leave your options open.
But what are the options? Because it has
Rather
to.
than have to go down the road later and say, oh, we got to increase it 1, and then a year later, oh, we got to increase it 1. It just opens, it makes it easier. The chances of us even having 3 applications for anything are pretty slim, I believe.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
And I think also the
area for anybody to have, especially a retail business.
Right, and especially what Dean explained, that it's not, it would apply to a retail or a micro business, or you listed a couple other ones. So what happens if we got one that was not a regular retail, but like a micro business, and then somebody really wanted to put up a regular retail business and they couldn't because the license was already taken by a micro, and I think that would be restricting businesses.
I'm all for the 3 because I'm with Robin. I just don't see us going to be the area that I can see more Lake Drive with greenhouses than I can retail.
So the reason I'm asking the question is if Dean is correct and there's a small likelihood that we're going to get an application, and if we do, we might get 1. If your concern is that, what if that one goes to, someone that we'd prefer that it went somewhere else? If you're not going to get more than 1, that's going to happen regardless of the number that you choose, right? And I'm just trying to limit the amount of time we spend discussing it, because I think, one of the things that came up last time too was how the city numbers and the county numbers mesh. And I believe, I've read a lot of stuff, so I might be wrong about this, but I think it was on that webinar that you referenced earlier. So if Anoka County meets their quota, we won't get any more. And you've got Fridley, you've got Columbia Heights, you've got, places that have, as Dean had said earlier, existing vacant buildings, which is what people will want to put these things in. They don't want to have to build something. So I just think the likelihood that it's going to come here is small, and the problem about first come, first serve is going to exist whether we have 1 or 3. And so it just makes sense to me to just limit the amount of time that we spend on this and just say, we'll stick with 1, and this is no big deal. If you decided that things are going good and you wanted to open it up to more than that, if the law in the state allows us to.
Stick with 1 is actually a change. If we're going to stick with something, we stick with the 3 that we decided on the last meeting.
You're right.
Yeah, we could take a vote. Robin?
Okay.
This is Robin.
That's okay. Start voting. Start voting.
Wait, before we take a vote, I have a question.
Okay.
So I'm kind of confused. You're talking about, Janet, saving time. Is that the big issue?
We're spending a lot of time talking about this, and it's probably a moot point. So I would say meet the letter of the law and let them sort things out. And then when we know more information, we can more, kind of like we just talked about with the information that we had with this truck wash. I mean, it's hard to make decisions about things when you don't have good, complete information. But we have to legally comply with this. So my recommendation is meet what we have to legally comply with. Don't spend a lot of time on it because it's going to change 15 times in the next whatever. And when things get, when the dust settles, then we can be more intentional about what we really want in Columbus. And again, I'm not saying this because I'm against it, because I'm not.
I guess my question, maybe now I should come back with, what's the matter with 3?
I mean, would we only allow 1 liquor store in Columbus? If we had a liquor store, would we only allow 1 and let them control the market?
Right.
Because that's what's going to happen. They're going to jack their rates up.
Well, I'm just looking at...
Because they know they got the market.
But I see Janet's point, and I think that's a valid point. Unlike a liquor stores, which have been around legal for years, even no matter what side you fall on this, it's all an unknown. This has been being referred to as the Great American Experiment right now, right? So Janet's right. We don't know what's going to happen with cannabis in the future. And if you were on that webinar, clearly the state agency that's in charge of it isn't even fully formed yet and doesn't know. I was on that webinar, and the general counsel put on a good presentation, but then when he was asked questions, he had a hard time answering some of them. So if we have an overabundance of caution until this great experiment plays out, then we can come back and we know where we stand, we know what's going to happen, we've got a little bit more firm ground to stand on with all these types of businesses and what they're going to look like. Then we can make a more informed decision if we want to add 3 in the future. I could go either way, but I understand that I think that's what you're saying is, hey, let's see what happens and let this play out.
Yeah, and
it's more of a perception than it is anything else.
Yeah,
because I really
think so.
think it will play out the way it plays out based on.
Because I agree that would make sense, except what if we did have 2 right away? I don't think that's going to happen. But if we did, we're kind of out of luck. We might be missing out on something. So why not 3? I mean, I really don't see, I think it's a bigger risk to go with 1 than 3.
So part of what I also think about, and again, Dean, weigh in if I'm thinking about this incorrectly, but whether you say 1 or 3, right? You come up with whatever the rules are going to be, and now the state changes those. So now we have to go and change our rules. Then they change them again, and we have to change our rules again. So it's harder to do that when you've got several of these things. I just think you're kind of making a statement with 1 to say, we're going to do this because we have to, but we really don't want to dive deep into this until you guys get your act together. That's more my philosophy. Whether or not it practically plays out, I think we're all in agreement, likely we won't get in.
And I'm just looking at it, let's set a number so that it's probably going to change, because not everything is set in stone yet, and we can revisit, but just to get through the process, that's what we did at the last meeting, was just set it out there. So Robin, what are you comfortable with?
I guess I feel is I have no problem having 3. I don't think they're going to be used. And it just solves us from having to go, like you say, suddenly we get 2 businesses right away that want in, and we can't accommodate them except for the fact that we said we could only have 1 license. And I would hate to see that happen. And 3 doesn't mean we give out 3 licenses. It just says we can, if we so choose, to give out 3 licenses. It doesn't make it a mandatory thing to do that. That's my opinion.
Ron?
Well, is that true, Dean?
Yeah, if we have 3 licenses available and someone applies and meets the criteria, we then cannot deny them, right? Right, Dean?
That is correct. So if you in this process had 3 credible registrations submitted to you by the state, and you said you would take 3, you're going to take them all. You can't pick and choose at that point.
And it doesn't have to be a license from somebody in the state. So we could get somebody from Colorado coming in and wanting a license in our city and opening up a business as well.
That is true. And 40% of the applications for the disadvantaged are from out of state.
But wouldn't they have to go through the state of Minnesota for a license?
Yeah, they do, but they're Elvis. So we're not supporting local business is the point. You're supporting an out-of-state business.
Okay, but that just didn't make sense. So saying that we would have to accept somebody, I mean, they still have to go through the state process, so it's kind of a moot point.
Well, it's a moot point, but I think, get me wrong if I'm wrong on this, but I think there was more people out of state applied for licenses than in state.
That is true.
Yeah.
And
That
I
is
mean,
what
it
they're
was
saying.
amazing, the number, not that it makes,
It doesn't affect our 1 or 3.
no.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're looking
Would
for.
actually give it, I think it would be more favorable to have 3, because if we had somebody from out of state and somebody from Columbus or in-state, then at least we can accommodate both and not just the one from Colorado or wherever.
Well, I think it is harder. I mean, we have some businesses in Columbus that the corporate is out of state, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's harder to deal with them because the people that make the decision are not here locally. You have to try to find them and coordinate with them. And so, I mean, if we ended up with 3 that were out of state, that could be a little bit harder for the staff. I think it's just good. We got a clarification. If you say that you'll take 3 and you got 3, you got to take them.
Okay.
So you still vote?
So are you still voting for 3, Robin?
Yes.
Ron, 1 or 3?
You know, I don't think it really makes a difference. 3.
Sue, 3.
3.
Madam Chair, what if we split the difference and just do 2?
No, no.
The peacemaker, the middle child peacemaker.
1.5, huh?
Okay, so you got 4 at 3.
I'll go with Janet on 1.
Okay.
Barb, 1.
Janet, 1.
Ah, crap. I'm the new guy, come on.
It's okay, you're not the tiebreaker if you go with 1.
Yeah.
And Dean, we can change this before January 31st, correct?
Before December 31st, yes.
Yeah. I honestly, I think for now, until we find more, I'm more comfortable with 1.
With 1? Okay. Now you're the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
Rob, 3.
Okay.
3 it is.
So 3 it is.
Okay, these are all pure policy decisions. You're all the ones that are going to decide this. And there is a lot of time between now and the end of the year to make changes and tweak this information. The third category, we had a long discussion about the Lake Drive zoning districts, and there were a lot of business options that were listed as being satisfactory. Only one of those was questioned, and that is based upon any extraordinary demands for sewer and water in manufacturing, in particular if waste disposal is an issue in a private sewer district. So comments or debates about Lake Drive?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Dean, I've been thinking, if we have to do this by state law. I don't believe it's going to be a big boon to the city tax-wise. I don't think it's a boon for the people who are smoking the pot. If we push everybody over to the freeway corridor where there's sewer and water, we would eliminate the septic tank and private well issue and the pollution of washing marijuana leaves or whatever they do. And that would also mean that people who are, if you're going to come in and build a 200,000 square foot brick building to grow your pot inside and process it or whatever they're going to do, it has to be somebody who's going to really contribute to the tax base, because the property is more expensive in the freeway corridor and the design standards are higher, and that would kind of move it away from our community a little bit and hopefully provide some financial relief for the city. Anybody else? Just a thought?
Eleanor, did you want to share what you heard from Chris when you asked him the question about the private septic and?
Yep, so I did speak briefly with our septic official, Chris, about about these concerns with the septic system rules. He talked to the university and relayed some information back to me. The main concerns that they have are in manufacturing. There are septic systems that are being designed and built to deal with them. With our high water table, it becomes a little bit difficult to do those more intensive septic systems, and so limiting at least manufacturing to sewer and water seems like a good idea from his perspective, just to avoid those more complicated issues. And he's like, he did say that, you know, depending on what they're making, it might be easier to do it on septic, but it might be completely impractical to do it on septic. So just moving all of them over is an option for manufacturing from his perspective.
So are we saying then that we want to keep this in the freeway district? Is that the gist that I'm getting from this?
That's my gist, or my option.
Yep.
At least.
And that was just the manufacturing?
Huh?
That was just the manufacturing, moving it over to the freeway district, or was it all 11?
I was thinking, well, is manufacturing growing indoors, or is that a?
Yeah, well.
No, that's cultivation.
Cultivation, yeah.
Okay, so cultivation I would do. I would do manufacturing. And our pot shops would all be on that district, I believe. Or, I'm thinking.
Yeah, retail, micro-business, and temporary events listed under highway. Retail.
And in my mind, that will create bigger buildings, better buildings, and better tax base for the city.
So you're saying manufacturing, add that to the highway retail? And what other one?
Move.
Cultivating.
Cultivation, manufacturing. And not just to the retail, but they could go down West Freeway Drive or Hornsby Street and put up a big building and grow pot.
It'd definitely be a bigger tax base there.
Yep. Well, that
And you'd be collecting money for
sewer and water.
Well, yeah, because we're going to have a sewer and water problem just like with the other one, so you want
Get
to...
our water tower sooner
Yeah.
than later. Anybody else? Sorry.
That's okay. Rob?
No, ma'am.
So to clarify what I'm hearing, just moving indoor cultivation and manufacturing out of Lake Drive and limiting that to the light industrial and general business districts.
No, highway retail.
That also includes like highway commercial and our general business up by the interchange. Where we had them listed currently was in the light industrial, general business, and then along Lake Drive. Do we want to start including them allowed over by the interchange? Those types of businesses as well.
Well, it's just like a warehouse, really. I don't know why you wouldn't. It's just like home. What is it called?
Home occupation.
Their home?
Their home.
Oh, bare homes.
It's the same type of.
Is it the same type?
But they can have events in
They're
those.
going to be more like a greenhouse than a...
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Have you
Than
ever
a
gone?
post-form building or
Yeah.
anything. They're going to be a greenhouse.
If you ever go down to Iowa, they got a lot of those.
I thought what we talked about last time is that, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we say no greenhouses, no hoop buildings, nothing? If they're growing, it has to be in like a tip-up. Isn't that what we said last time? Dean?
We talked about the hoop houses. We didn't necessarily specify a complete tip-up. I think anybody that's doing indoor cultivation is going to want a glass roof, and whatever combination allows for a certain amount of direct light in addition to control lighting. But ultimately, you're going to make that decision what it is. But you're right. We said, no little seasonal greenhouse building. It's got to be somewhat substantial. And I think Rob had mentioned at the last meeting, and most of my sources that I've been in contact with have indicated, it's kind of a romantic 1960s hippie thing that maybe we could grow this outdoors. Nobody's in any of these competitive markets, nobody's growing anything outdoors other than hemp. And I suspect the other thing that's going to dictate most of these businesses is having existing brick and mortar available. And our community doesn't have any of those facilities to speak of. You don't have any vacant properties. But whether you're in Minneapolis or a lot of the suburbs, there's a lot of property on the commercial market, both commercial and industrial buildings. Anybody outside of what I would say, to add to your concern or discussion about out-of-state businesses, pot has been legal since 2012 in some states. And the businesses that have been successful are the ones that have jumped to other states like Minnesota because they know what's required and what's involved. But anybody that's going to make an investment in any of these businesses, I don't think we're going to see a brand new building being put up for any of these. I certainly could be wrong, but with a lot of existing structure available all over the marketplace, and this might not be as true in some of the more rural markets, but certainly here in the 7-county metro area, I think you're going to see all of these facilities, including indoor cultivation, going into some existing buildings in communities and not starting from scratch. That's my gut. That shouldn't guide your decisions, but this is a big investment, and one of the reasons that out-of-state businesses are doing it is that they've got their foot in the ground, they know what they're doing, and they've got investors lined up, and they're being successful. So if I could go back to Lake Drive, do I understand that, at least tentatively, everything could stay other than the cultivation or manufacturing? Is that kind of consensus?
Yes.
Yep.
And then my next question is that either the C Light or the CI, either one, both?
We don't have that one on our list. CI, or is it, which one is it? CC?
Well, so the east side of Lake Drive is the commercial / industrial, and the west side is the CI / light.
Okay.
So are you talking about both sides of the road for the Lake Drive districts, or is it one or the other? Or do these businesses need to move from one side of the road to the other, but all of them could stay on Lake Drive? So that's just another clarification that needs to be done ultimately.
I think it's hard to know because you don't know what these, we had lots of discussion about what fits on one side versus the other, and we don't know what these businesses require, so it's hard to know where to put them.
Well, and I think one of the reasons why we talked about not having it on Lake Drive, or we didn't think it would work, is that because of the septic, and we don't have city water and sewer on either side of Lake Drive. So if that was the reason why we were taking it out, then it would make sense to do both sides.
But I think do you take all the businesses out, or is it just the manufacturing and the cultivation? Yeah,
I would say just manufacturing and cultivation. Some of these guys do have money, and they might put up a building. Look at the cement factory. That wasn't cheap, and it's a moneymaker.
Yeah, the growing of cannabis is a very scientific now. It's not throw your seeds in the backyard and see what comes up. These are all precise measurements of soil quality, fertilizers, the right enzymes. I mean, these places that grow it are very sophisticated. It's nothing like, I have been to one growing area building before when I was out in Colorado. The amount of equipment is astronomical. I was totally shocked by how advanced. I mean, everything is down to the day as to what is going to happen to these plants and what they get for nutrients and oxygen and so on and so forth. That I just feel that most of us really have no clue as to what all is going to entail in the manufacturing process. So I would agree that, we got to have it on both sides.
I'd like to just clarify. So a meso business also is allowed to cultivate and manufacture. So is that a freeway district only activity?
I think you're talking about water use, right, for the freeway district? So it would.
I don't see practical limitations between just a manufacturer or a meso business that is doing manufacturing. I think that they're similar. And so if you're not interested in cultivation or manufacturing, a meso business is allowed to do both.
Then that should go on the freeway corridor, right?
Right.
Yes.
That's my question.
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't hear what you said, Jesse. What did you say?
So then a meso should go on the freeway corridor.
Let's go around. What do you?
There's sewer and water.
Water problem.
I think they do a lot of recycling of it because if it's a.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I don't think
Absolutely. Hydroponics.
That's mostly hydroponics.
Hydroponics is how they grow nowadays, and you will use the same water over and over and over again until it's time to change to a new fertilizer formula, at which case that's the only time that water gets changed out. So it isn't a huge water guzzler because, like I said, they do use that same water, and they might use that same water for a few weeks, simply because of the nutrients that they have in it. And there's certain growing periods. I've been reading up on this. Well, hey, you got
Will we be seeing an application come our way by any chance, Robin?
I got to know what's going on. I got to know what I'm talking about. So, yes, we have, my wife and I have looked at, cultivation marijuana and stuff like that. And it's very specific as to, literally time down 2 weeks as to how long it takes to go from a seed to a harvestable plant. And during those weeks, there are very specific weeks 2 through 4, you do this, always. And so you'd have like weeks 2 through 4 would use one batch of water, but then weeks 4 through 8 is going to be a different batch of water, but it's going to be the same water being used over and over and over again. That is what my wife and I got the gist of is, it's hydroponics is what they use for the most part. They don't do soil. So it's just running water over the roots and the roots taking what they need. So it really isn't as water heavy as you would think it would be.
So what do you know about growing cucumbers?
I know a lot about growing a lot of things. My wife and I are, for those of you who've been by our house, you can see we have extensive gardens, and so we do a lot of gardening, and so I do have some knowledge, but I wanted more true knowledge of the cannabis business and what they use. So I don't think we have to worry about there being a water issue at all on any of these.
So
that goes back to putting it over on the freeway corridor?
Yeah. Yeah, because you still have to have water. You are going to have wastewater. At the end of weeks 2 through 4, what are you going to do with that water? Well, it's all full of fertilizers and maybe contaminants from the plants. I don't know, but it's going to have to be processed. And I certainly don't want to see something like that just being dumped into our ground. We hear enough about medicines in our groundwater and stuff like that. I want it treated. So yes, I believe that they have to be in the freeway district where they can get city sewer and water.
Okay.
A mound system would grow real good, though, if you dumped it all in private.
You'd have to mow every week. Did you get that, Dean?
First of all, I don't dispute anything that Robin's said. I'm like he, I'm reading a lot of stuff. It tends to get overwhelming. The majority of these businesses are doing water reuse. When you're in certain elements of manufacturing, which not only the meso business, but the medical businesses do, is when there are introduced additives, which the state simply says, we're going to monitor, we're going to control. We don't know what that is. And so if a concern, whether it's cultivation or manufacturing, should be in the city's sewer and water district, then that would also take meso business and medical business out. Not wholesale, not testing, not transporter, and not delivery.
Yeah. Are you looking for an answer on medical too?
I'm waiting for some consensus that, for the reasons that you've talked about, whether it's cultivation or manufacturing, because meso business and medical businesses are allowed to do the same, do we move all 4 of those out of Lake Drive and simply say it's got to go to the light industry and general business district? We've already got manufacturing and medical there.
I would agree with that.
I think most of us would agree with that. Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to cross those off of my master list. And then I go back to the question, is there a difference in your mind about allowing any of these uses in either of our Lake Drive districts? Can they be in both? Or should any of these be split out for one reason or another? Personally, and I don't like to try and tip your discussions because this is your policy, but you've created this C-Light district, hopefully to be more compatible with adjacent residential uses, and the remaining businesses are going to be not extraordinary outdoor storage uses. They're going to be indoor companies, certainly the wholesale and the testing. Yes, there will be some sort of truck activity associated with them. I don't think you're going to see a transporter out here. I don't think you're going to see a delivery, but they're also certainly compatible with what you may have wanted to achieve in the C-Light district. And maybe you don't want them in the CI district because that's the more intense. That's just part of the debate you should take part in right now.
I think the light commercial district would be best.
Do you mean on Lake Drive?
Right.
Okay. Is that light?
It's on the west side.
Yep. So that would be the CI Light, which is this area on the west side of Lake Drive.
Yep.
Does everybody agree?
I'm fine with that. I don't know if our business owners or anybody who wants to buy on that other side would question why we would do that. You know, if somebody came in and we said, oh, well, it's only allowed on this side of the street, which I agree, I would prefer it on the west side of the street, but would somebody coming in to do a business, would we have a good reason to say why we're not allowing it on the other side? Probably not. We're trying to encourage them to go to the west side, but
Isn't the only difference really is there's buildings over on the west side already there. I mean, you get over on the east side, on the east side is the buildings. The west side doesn't really.
But there are some homes that are in the business district that could be torn down. I'm fine either way.
I don't know. I think stick it on the west side and that's that. Move along. We still
Okay.
don't know all the facts.
Yep.
West side?
West side.
I don't know.
I'm going around west side.
Dean, can I ask a question about the testing? I don't know. I don't know what exactly they're doing, but I'm thinking that most places that do testing of either medical or no, I'm not. I'm just talking about a testing facility that is testing a product, whether it's a medical product or an industrial product or whatever. There's oftentimes a lot of chemicals and things like that involved. So I'm wondering whether or not that is not really compatible in a district that does not have sewer and water. I mean, again, we don't know, but I'm thinking maybe that one should be in the freeway district as well until we know more about what they actually do. The other ones are just transport businesses or wholesale. Those can be on Lake Drive. I don't have a problem with that, but I'm just a little worried about the testing because I don't. A typical testing one, you know what the chemicals are, there's probably a lot of experience. I don't know what this one is. So with absence of information, I'd put them over in a place where you know that water is going to be treated and whatever water they need to do their stuff would be more than adequate over there.
Yeah, I wish I could shed light. I don't know the extent. I tend to think, based on what I continue to read, is that these are fairly small and discrete facilities. Those that operate a testing facility cannot be a part of or have any ownership in any other business. They have to meet several different types of standards that are listed in the statute. Will they use certain products to break down and test to make sure that a percentage or whatever it is they're looking for meets a state standard? I'm sure they will, but I think what you're talking about are relatively small quantities for testing. But I can't tell you with certainty that you're going to end up with a 100,000 square foot building and therefore it ought to be in the freeway. I can't answer that.
I can say I like your point as a very good point about the different chemicals and stuff like that they use. Again, it comes down to, do you want them putting it into a septic system that goes into our groundwater, or would you rather it go to a treatment facility plant where some of that is taken out? And I would tend to agree with you that it should be in the freeway district, a testing facility, simply for that reason, for disposal of water that has been contaminated through chemicals. Again, I don't know how they test it either, but I'm assuming there's chemicals that are going to be involved. It's not just a water thing. So I would like to see that water be treated through the metropolitan.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, but it would be nice to know, because I don't know that they use chemicals when they're testing how much THC is in something.
I think that's how they get it out of whatever they're testing. So you extract it from leaves or gummies or whatever, you use solvents to get it out of there.
Oh, okay. Well, if we know that, then I agree.
Well, I mean, I'm just assuming that's how you.
Well, I know that. Right. Well, I don't think we can assume. That's why I was wondering if we could find out.
You can certainly find
I
that.
just don't want to, now we're crossing everything out of the Lake Drive district, and we were trying to kind of encourage some of these things. So if there's not chemicals, then I think we should leave it in. Because we don't have a filtration system right now. That's what we were talking about with our water tower and treatment center. We don't have a treatment center for water. We can't filter out any of that stuff.
No,
It's just going
the
into.
Met Council would in the wastewater, that's where it would get treated.
So we send all the water from there to the Met Council?
Well, that's how it all goes now.
That's how all of the septics work, or all the sewer system work now.
Well, why would we need a treatment system then?
We don't need a treatment system. What we need is the water to go into the
Sewer system.
into the sewer system where it does get treated.
I think, Sue, when you're talking about the treatment, they were talking about treating to get rid of the manganese, so that's the water that we would get to drink. And so the treatment facility might be treating water that before it goes to businesses or households to remove some of the minerals or like manganese that they consider too high to be healthy. So that, I suppose it could also, they could also require some treatment of some other substances before it gets to the Met Council's facility, but I don't know that they do that now, do they?
Currently, the only thing we do, we add a little fluoride, a little chlorination, and a flocculant to help reduce the iron in the water.
Yeah.
Another thing, too, is if you do get issues in areas where you do have sanitary sewer and the discharge is too hot, they can require you to put pre-treatment facilities on there before it discharges into that system to be treated down where the ultimate flow discharges.
I think basically what we're trying to decide is where do we want to put a testing facility? And I think the general consensus, at least as far as I'm concerned, is that we want to keep it where we already have sewer and water. So that we don't have to suddenly find out later that, oh, they're going to be using some chemical that maybe isn't so great for our
Groundwater.
groundwater, thank you. So I think we really do need to keep it in the freeway district. That's my opinion.
You know what the problem is? None of us are biologists or pharmacists, so we're trying to, diagnose something.
My wife is a bit of an herbalist and essential oil person, and so I have watched her extract chemicals from leaves and stuff like that. It's not a horrible process. It's mostly alcohol that is used to extract chemicals out of the leaves and whatnot. So it's not a terribly poisonous thing that we have to worry about, but I think we do want it to go through a sanitary sewer.
Well, anything that's more protective, that's the route to go. I'm with you. I agree with Janet. I mean, we don't know what it is, so why
take the chance?
Yeah, just throw it over there.
Run it into the Mississippi. Think all the happy fish.
Pump it over to Forest Lake.
All right, did you get that, Dean?
I have wholesale business, transporter, and delivery remaining in the ACEIT district, the west side of Lake Drive.
Correct.
And we'll agree in a moment which districts to put those in, but I suspect because some of them are already located in the light industry and general business, that's where they would all go. The last question I have here, it wasn't on my list per se, but regards a temporary event. Assuming that we do these by interim use permit, we need to take each zoning district, and if we're going to allow a temporary event, we need to add that to an ordinance amendment. So whether you had or did not have any one of these remaining businesses end up locating on Lake Drive, the way I read the law, you could still get someone requesting that a temporary event be held out there. And I'm not finding, as I said earlier in the statute, where we can require these to be located only in licensed facilities. So my question is, would you allow a temporary facility or a temporary event within the light industrial or the CI light district on Lake Drive?
Yes, it couldn't be worse than heydays, so.
And I think if you understood that that's, not an unlikely activity, the debate will come later when we determine that we can restrict these to existing buildings, even if they're not licensed as a cannabis business. But we're not going to allow tents to be put up for a 4-day event. We can encounter that later, but assuming that you understand, you could get a request. Is the CI Light District one in your minds where you could have a 4-day event?
I got to ask you a quick question. So somebody could say, maybe I could make some money out of this and build a building and almost like a wedding venue and just keep using it over and over for that? Is that what you're talking about?
We see nothing in the statute that says how often you would permit these. I don't know where the audience is coming from for any event in Columbus. I think there are many other locations, especially those associated with other major facilities, that make sense. But yes, right now we don't know if we would have to allow any structure that might exist, regardless of whether they're licensed as a cannabis business or not, to be used as a facility as long as it met our otherwise designed standards. And if our standards say we're not going to allow an outdoor tent and rely on temporary fencing and temporary lighting and whatever, I think we'll cross that burden later. There's not a lot of options on Lake Drive anywhere where one of these would be held. And again, it's not a destination. I don't see events being held here, but I need to ask you the question. Would you like a cannabis, temporary event being added to the CI Light District as an interim use?
I'm just thinking of odor.
What?
Odor.
Oh. Odor?
Well, there, you will also determine whether or not you allow on-site consumption. Okay. And so if you allowed on-site consumption, the odors you're going to get are from the vehicles that show up. And if you're allowing smoking flower, then that might be visible. But I don't know that that's that big of an issue.
Right.
What about band music?
I wanted some clarification, Dean. I thought that the temporary events, no matter what, also didn't allow smoking flower. It was only edibles. Or is that
that is directly prohibited in the let me see if I can find a quick reference. It's directly prohibited in the micro business. There's no smoking. Those are all edibles. Okay. They can be high potency edibles, but it's either liquid or chewable items. There's also no alcohol permitted in that facility and no tobacco use. I'd have to clarify that the event allows, we could prohibit on-site consumption, but I am not seeing here where.
Well, I think if somebody's going to have one of these events, they're going to want to have it down by like a entertainment business, not on Lake Drive.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I've seen them a lot of places.
Okay.
Okay.
Never know.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, you've seen these events, tell me, I can't picture them, what are they like?
It's like a fair.
Yeah.
And so they sell a whole bunch of different kinds of
Yep.
products?
You'll
And
have
who comes
vendors
to
of
them? Are
all
they
sorts.
All kinds of vendors,
Are they-
just like a little county fair.
And is it like retailers that typically go or anybody?
Anybody.
Just,
Almost like a farmer's market.
Yeah.
yep. I live on Grand Avenue, if there's any sort of festival on Grand Avenue.
I mean, I guess my question is, I wouldn't mind having it
And they're
in the Lake Drive area.
I think Eleanor has a very good point.
I do live in St. Paul on Grand Avenue, and the couple times that there has been, like, shut down Grand Avenue, a little festival or something, there's always some dispensaries selling products, just like a beer garden or anything, and you can just go up and buy one.
But is that what they call that, an event? Do they have an event permit or something? I'm just trying to figure out, like.
I'm just saying that these events would probably, they're allowed the higher potency marijuana than the ones currently, down my street. But it would be very similar to that kind of thing.
But is it, I guess
They have an event license from the city to be there at the festival, but they aren't currently selling the high potency marijuana. These are established dispensaries, though, that already have their foot in the door for retail.
So that's my question. Is this like, can they sell this at a different type of event like you're having, I mean, Blue Heron Days, and now they're going to have some of that? Or is this just like all this is people selling cannabis products, and there's not like Blue Heron Days? This is not mixing those two things.
It could be either. So it could be something like we don't have a Blue Heron Days or something like that, so we wouldn't have the situation you have. But we could have a situation where somebody's coordinating, because there's a lot of acres open in that district, and they say, well, let's have a fair just for these, and all these businesses sign up and put their tent in there. And it would be just like that. But my question is, I mean, I don't think it would be terrible to have it once a year, but I wouldn't want to have it every weekend. So if we can't limit the number of times that they have a temporary event, then, I don't know that we want to allow any. If it's as many as they can come up with or zero, then I just wouldn't want to have it open to let them do it however often they want to do it.
I mean, I'm just thinking about the hoops we made those poor people with the whippets go through to get their event license for whatever, 6 whippet races a year. And that's whippets. So, like, does it have to fit into our event permitting that's currently on our books now? Because that wouldn't allow for much.
We could do that.
Well, I think you'd have to have an application from a bigger entity that might decide to invite a cannabis event organizer, but regardless, we would be issuing an event license for one and a cannabis event license to another. Whether they could join together, I don't know. I think this is pretty specialized in what they try to do, and that's getting manufacturers, wholesalers, and sometimes retailers are the ones that want these events to see what on earth is out there in the marketplace. For certain, what the law allows is the sale of any of the legal products, and it's up to cities to determine whether or not on-site consumption is allowed. In all of the notes that I've got, I don't see a specific prohibition about smoking, but the draft model ordinance that was put out simply says cities can determine whether they allow on-site consumption of edibles. And so it's a gray area. It's another one of my question marks. Let's assume you can't you can't smoke at these events, but they would have to have a separate area, and all of these, just like a liquor store, have to have different entrances from a retail area to a consumption area. Has to be marked, it has to be lighted, it has to be secure. I don't see temporary events being in, tents. It's way too complicated. I could see this being in an empty warehouse somewhere that's in a community that's got one or more of these businesses. That would be most likely that they could get a short-term lease. But to Sue's question about how often would we have to permit these, there's nothing in the statute that regards this. So could an individual come in with an application and say, I want 22 events, and they apply for them all at one time? You hold a public hearing, you have all the dates in place. I don't know. I do not know at this time whether we can restrict those to a certain number. The law only says they cannot exceed more than 4 days. They have to give us names in advance of all of the people that are showcasing products. However, it says within 72 hours of the event that they can be amended. And so again, I'm thinking out loud, trying to answer your questions. It's not inconceivable that an event organizer that's licensed by the state could come into Community X and say, I want to hold an event once a month. I'm going to apply for one interim use permit. Here are the participants. And then by the regulations, if those participants changed, they can make that change within 3 days of the actual event. And so conceivably, somebody could come and ask for it. How realistic is that in our market? I think it's pretty slim, but I can't answer the question, how many are there? So if Sue's comfort level is once a year, I don't think you can bet on that.
The other question I had is, and this is maybe Jack's area. So like with Fall Fest, we have to get a permit from the county to hold the Fall Fest because our event is on a county road. So if there was a cannabis event on Lake Drive or a cannabis event on, we would also, it would also be subject to their permitting process. Is that right?
That would be correct.
Madam Chair.
That's not that restrictive, though. It's more or less a process of notification and providing traffic control, but they would have to go through the county.
But they would, we have to show them traffic control and do all that. I imagine they would have to do the same thing.
It is also a part of anytime running ACES through their special event permit. Anytime they do an event like Freedom Fest or anything, they also have to go through Anoka County Highway Department and the Sheriff's Office and do all of those things as well.
So do we know where Anoka County is landing on these kinds of things? Because they could have a very different view either for or against than we would.
I don't know that they've ever been inundated by a great number at one time, so I'm not exactly sure what their policy is on that. But, as long as you meet their requirements for the traffic control and provide the information they need and show the security you're going to have, they're usually okay with it. But again, if it got to be a great volume, they may change their policies too.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So anyway, everyone, this sounds like a lot of monkey business. I can just see it. Buying 3 new computers and another file cabinet and printing all the applications and on and on and on. If you want to buy a joint, go to Forest Lake or go with Eleanor down to St. Paul.
Yeah.
Why even bother it? Just say no.
We are not allowed to completely prohibit temporary event licenses. We do have to allow them.
Say that again.
We are not allowed to prohibit temporary event license permits. We do have to allow some.
Well, you just have to make it so that if you didn't really want them, you would just have to make it so that you didn't say no, but they could never really do it.
Well, this leads to my question. We need to determine, is Lake Drive a suitable location. And if you conclude it's a can of worms, there's too many questions, and it is a county road and they'll need multiple permits, then for this discussion right now that we're on, you may conclude that an event just isn't there. We don't know that we can limit how many there would be per year, to Sue's question. And if it just seems like too much trouble, then you say, okay, to Eleanor's point, we have to pick a district, and you just say, we're going to do it in the freeway corridor, and we'll pick one or two of those. As long as we pick one district for all of these uses, we have fulfilled the legislation. And it doesn't mean you can't come back and amend the ordinance and add an interim use for the Sea Light district to say, let's allow events, but you don't have to do it coming right out of the chute.
I think limiting in that, in with those regards, I think limiting to just the freeway district at this point really does kind of put as you were saying earlier, Janet, that it does kind of make it less desirable to try and do something there. There isn't good access to that area for large groups of people, other than going through running ACES somehow. But I think the freeway district is the most limiting that we can do at this point.
Yes.
And since we have to pick some place, I think a place that is less likely to be used is a good idea.
Yeah, I agree with that. The only other one I would think, and we did talk about running ACES a little bit, I mean, what if they wanted to have an event and they had a license? I don't know if they're going to, but if they did, then we would be allowing it there. But I agree with the freeway district, where most of them are going to be anyway, the licensed.
Everybody in agreement to freeway district?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Done.
Okay. My list has consensus as I wanted. We are suggesting no temporary event. I take that off the list, which wasn't on yours anyway. We have eliminated cultivation, meso business, medical business, testing business, and manufacturing. So we would be considering within the west half of Lake Drive, the CI Light District, wholesale business, transporter business, and delivery.
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. Next item. I ran out of paper on that pad. I need a new notepad. The next category is the variety of more retail-oriented districts. The HRCC, the high-density mixed use, the general commercial, highway commercial. We had retail, micro-business, and temporary events. Discussion.
We've taken the temporary events out of there, I believe, by putting them in the freeway district.
The freeway district includes like everything over here in the area. And so the temporary events right now is within this dark red, the light red, and this pink here, and then these oranges. So the top half, the north half of the freeway district is what we're talking about right now.
I would still not want them over by our mixed-use high.
I would agree.
I thought the LI, or light industrial, or isn't that the
That's the purple.
Yeah.
So the way that we have broken this up so far on Dean's Dean's memo, is the northern half of the freeway district having more of the retail businesses, the retail, the micro business, and the temporary events. And then the southern half of the freeway district being the general business, this pink, and then the light purple, the light industrial, having the cultivation, manufacturing, wholesale testing, medical, transporter, delivery, and the mezzo businesses. And that's how those two areas of the freeway district have been split up so far. All right.
I agree.
You okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what are we agreeing to? Not taking it out of the mixed-use high?
We can still have that conversation.
Next.
And
This is where I'm looking.
no, she's talking about the LI and the GB, right?
She's also talking about that.
What's next on your list, Dean?
I'm not certain that I caught. The only thing you did on that category was remove MUH. Otherwise, whether it's retail, microbusiness, or temporary events are suitable in the other categories.
So we're removing the option for retail in the mixed use high density.
Eliminating mixed use from that bullet.
Okay.
That's good. That gets us down to the southern half, as Eleanor described, and that was just the light industry, general business. And if we're required to identify any outdoor cultivation, this would be the location. Manufacturing, wholesale testing, medical transporter, all of the others, and I would add into that then the mezzo business, because we don't have a category for it. So these two districts would literally allow anything, but we do need, because we don't have a zoning district with mezzo business, we need to add that. That'd be the only location where a mezzo business would be allowed. Otherwise, is that satisfactory?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I'm not hearing anything.
It was a yes.
Temporary events, as I started out earlier, I cannot determine that we can restrict them to be located within other existing cannabis licensed facilities. And so a question becomes, we've got them located in essentially everything except mixed use high density within the freeway corridor or the mixed use medium. I just want to make sure that that's okay.
Yes.
I think it is.
Everybody?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, then there's really only a couple of things, and we've addressed these only to the extent that those businesses that may be using solvents or higher amounts of water are now all going to be located in the freeway corridor. Not unlike the truck wash, if there's some unusual demands here, which I'm not finding. We need to determine that as a community, but we also need to identify a district where this is going to happen. And I go back to some of the questions about whether the car wash is going to tax our system. In some instances, you'll find cities that are debating adding a water treatment plant, or they're adding a new a new storage facility. It is sometimes businesses that are high generators that get encouraged. You get a big apartment project, it may tip the balance on your water storage requirements and be the thing that puts you over a threshold where you have to bite the bullet and build a water tower. These are decisions, again, that go within the freeway corridor, because those are the people that pay for and support this. You're going to have to sell bonds and other things to make it work. The sewer system is less complicated as long as a sewer user gets permission from the Metropolitan Council on their waste flow. They're going to be allowed in the system. They may be paying a lot of SAC charges, and there are even some additional treatment charges that they have for big food manufacturers. I think I may have mentioned at our first meeting a big taxing facility, our food manufacturers, a pizza company. You could have Bernatello's as your largest employer in town. You're going to have one of the most sophisticated water treatment plants because of that one employer. But that's the decision that would happen. That isn't our problem. We don't worry about the sewer flow. That's an issue that the Metropolitan Council is going to be working with the Office of Cannabis Management on to determine that all of the waste treatment capacities are going to be met. The water issues, I don't see any of these facilities tipping that balance, but you're approaching the point when having one or more higher users come in, you wonder how you're going to afford this. All communities go through it. You're going to spend a couple $1 million on a treatment facility, whether you add new wells as a part of your enterprise system. That ends up being a function of all of those users' properties in the freeway corridor supporting and paying for that. And so Jack's going to have to balance the budget to show exactly how, if you have rate changes and other charges that become implemented within that system, they aren't going to be a general obligation burden for the community.
So
and I know I didn't,
this is Janet.
I didn't pipe in on the comments about road issues. You've established these two sides of the interstate highway as very high potential vehicle users and very high truck users. And while you're building a lot of those segments, or the county on the west side is managing West Freeway Drive, the improvements that continue on Hornsby Drive are going to be a function of those businesses that ultimately end up paying for this. I don't know the actual portion of all payments that Love's may have had in getting the dual turn lanes when that signal was put in place. I'm sure they regarded that as money well spent. It makes their business work better. And so as you go, there are going to be improvements to both sewer, water, and roads throughout the entire freeway corridor. There's no question. That's that's your city engineer keeping ahead of the curve. And I know they have brought up water tower and eventually maybe 10, 15 years to deal with manganese and other things. You get into water treatment, they are fantastically expensive, and you need a lot of people on the system to help pay for those improvements. But the water storage is going to be your next hurdle. There's no question. And so I don't know if at this particular time there is a need to talk about sewer and water demands for manufacturing solvents and odors. We are not allowed to establish regulations for odor, just like noise. Those are established by federal rules. We can talk to people about the types of ventilation systems they may have, what types of filters they may use in that filtration system, but we can't create rules. And so I'm okay to move on without answering the questions about what specific sewer and water demands may exist for cannabis manufacturing. I think it's going to take care of itself. We must be at the witching hour. I don't hear anything, so I'm going to move on to the last item I had.
You are.
Okay. And we discussed, or the discussion came up, and there was really no continuing debate about whether interim use can be used for every business. Clearly, in my mind, and I see this in discussions from other communities, that the interim use permit is going to be used for events. but I don't see any communities going towards interim use permits. One of the issues that I have personally, and I won't give you the tirade from your city attorney about allowing more permitted uses versus conditional. You've beaten that in the ground, and I'm happy to keep that. But I would argue against going with an interim use for anything that's involving brick and mortar business rather than what we traditionally use them for, and that was your residential zone business, which is no longer there, for things that were regarded temporary in nature. We do them for billboards because they're not permanent property improvements, and we do them for things like mining. But when you're talking about a brick and mortar improvement and you're talking about a state agency that is licensing facilities, and while they may not be forever, as long as the state licenses a facility, we have to license it ourselves or agree to it on an annual basis. And in spite of what concerns are, we don't know if these businesses are fly by night. If they lose their license, and we've issued a conditional use, by the state's own definition, those licenses are not transferable. And so we're starting over. And so I only want to say, and we don't have to resolve this tonight, we can continue it at the next meeting. I don't recommend that you consider the interim use permit for the other businesses. You reserve that for the events.
So anybody want to discuss that, or should we put it up?
Let's punt that to the next meeting.
Okay.
But I do have one question, and I noticed that there was a note on the bottom that Janet forwarded the opinion from the Star Tribune, but I don't see a copy of that.
It was emailed out to everybody.
Oh, it was emailed
out. And there's also, what's actually, that's an opinion piece, so there's obviously bias in that opinion, but they referenced a economic study that was done by the Federal Reserve in Kansas City, and that answered a lot of our questions about what they've learned, and some of it I thought was really beneficial. It's like 70 pages, not light reading, but if you want to get into how beneficial is it economically to the states that have done it and what have they learned from it, that would be definitely the thing to read. Yep. And I know you have I gave the reference to the actual study that this opinion piece was referring to, so if you want it, Eleanor can send it out again.
I will send out a bunch of resources. If anyone wants physical copies of anything, shoot me an email. I will print some stuff out for you guys.
Yeah, I think Janet's summary is a fair one. There certainly were some revealing things. I think the information, if you were a state that was debating as a part of your policy that you're going to make a lot of money, you might want to read that. And we're beyond that in Minnesota right now. The decision's been made. I sent you, and I think Eleanor forwarded those to you, a couple of other summaries from all of the states that have gotten into the business and what they're making. And it wasn't an intent to do anything other than to give you some of those ranges. Time is only going to tell whether this has made any economic sense or not. It isn't going to resolve personal opinions about whether it was the right decision to do. I think we all understand that. But I did read the same thing that Janet did, and it was grueling.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So that's all I have. Thank you so much for paying attention to this long a time.
Yeah, thank you, Dean.
Thanks, Dean. Hey, how's your hip?
And I have on my calendar, we're going to do this the first meeting in October.
Yes.
Is that right?
We will do cannabis meetings until we're done.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
We might need some to get through that next meeting.
Yeah, October 2nd.
Oh, we'll all be asleep then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, moving on, Planning Commissioners report. Scott?
I don't have anything.
I don't have anything. This is Barb.
Nothing for me.
And all what I have to say is there's still time to sign up to volunteer for Fall Fest. So, anybody that hasn't, sign up now. City Administrator.
I have nothing to report. I'm sure that's what you wanted to hear.
Planning and zoning.
Nothing to report at this time. I'll be sending out more resources and things as the days go by, but nothing right now.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
This is Rob and I motion that we adjourn tonight.
Scott, I'll second.
Motion's been made and second. Rob?
Aye. Scott, aye.
Janet, aye.
Barb, aye.
Jesse, aye.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye. Rob and I.
And Lynn, aye. Meeting adjourned at 9:10.
Bye, Dean.